Thank you, Robin. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Brookline School Committee meeting of November 5th, 2020. We have a full agenda with many people sign up for public comments, so I think we'll just dive right in. First order of business is approval of the consent agenda. I move that we approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Thank you, David. Are there any discussions? It's a pretty long agenda, but any questions, discussions? Okay, seeing none, I'll do a roll call to approve the consent agenda.
Maybe I'll ask.
Yes, Helen, go ahead.
I'll ask one question about the Apple agreement. It's a lease agreement for 5 years. The interest rate is terrific. And then the option to buy, but how many units or do we determine if we put in the amount and then we determine what we're going to buy from it? How does that work?
There are 550 units in this lease purchase.
See, Dave, I knew I wanted you to come online so that we can see you. That's why I asked the question.
No problem. Thank you.
But thank you. Okay, that's all I needed to know. I think it's great.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments or concerns, I'll take a roll call. Helen?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Dimitri?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So thank you. Claire, we're going to go to the student report. You get to chime in here.
Great. Hi there. My name is Claire Gallion, and I am the student representative on school committee. In preparation for this meeting, I conducted a school-wide survey with over 200 respondents, so I hope you listen carefully to what I'm saying tonight. I want to start off with one of my most shocking and important findings in my survey. The question was, how are you feeling about going back to school on November 9th? And if you're a freshman, how have you been feeling so far? There were two options, mostly good or mostly bad. 50% of students said mostly bad. 50% of students at our school are scared and upset about going back, half of the students. So let's keep that in mind going forward. Let's move on to my first question on the survey. For 9th grade, what's one positive thing about hybrid so far? Almost every response had something to do with seeing friends, meeting new people, or meeting their teachers. 2 people said that in person helps them focus better, and 1 person said they'd like to go on walks during the long breaks in between classes. My next question was, for 9th grade, what's one negative thing about hybrid so far? There was definitely more variation with the answers for this one, so here are some repeating issues that I read. There's no purpose of being in the building if we're still going to be on our computer all day. The school is freezing. The breaks in between classes are so long, and either you stand in the freezing cold or crowd into a hallway. Social distancing is not enforced during lunch. The one that repeated the most was that kids are not following social distancing rules. My next question was the one I mentioned earlier. How are you feeling about going back? I asked a follow-up question for students to explain the answer they picked. So now I'm going to read a series of quotes from the students who picked mostly good. The first quote. I picked mostly good because I'm excited to go back to school and see my teachers and classmates in person. School is a lot less awkward when you can all be together. I'm a firm believer that education is best learned in the classroom, and online school is not cutting it for me. The next quote. Mostly good because I feel so much more motivated to do work since most things are done in person. It's easier to finish assignments when I feel like I'm in real school. Honestly, I just love being surrounded by actual people. And the last quote. I picked the first option because going back has given me more opportunities to talk to more people at a time, including teachers. Now I will read some quotes from students who chose mostly bad. The first quote. I understand the desire to want students in the building, both for social and educational reasons. However, the hybrid model as currently constructed has very limited benefits in both areas. Being on Zoom in a classroom seems objectively worse than being on Zoom from home, where I can easily take breaks and get a glass of water and not wear a mask. Having to go outside into New England winters in between blocks and during lunch and any free blocks is not a workable solution. The second quote. I feel bad about school because many of the students aren't going to socially distance, and I'm worried that I'll get COVID and bring it to my family and club sports team. I have finally figured out how to succeed with Corona, and I think school will ruin it. Also, I do not understand why the school chose to go back now when the rates are at an all-time high. The next quote. I won't feel safe. Any person who coughs in the same room as me is going to make me panic. Closed windows, which will be closed due to cold outside temperatures, won't allow air circulation. Also, I'm sure the school committee is unaware that so many students hang out with each other without masks on in their homes. There are still parties going on, and a combination of that and school will cause the entirety of Brookline to be infected. The next quote. It honestly sounds awful to be sitting in a classroom on Zoom in the cold when we can do the same from home comfortably. The kids who need to be full-time are now going to have to go for half because we want to be in a physical classroom, which is selfish. And the last quote. I have fairly pessimistic views about this whole thing, and I'm genuinely worried for staff and peers. What happens if staff or students get sick? How will dance work in person? How will baking work in person? How can music classes continue safely in person? Will substitute teachers understand how to work a Zoom class? I've had subs who can't even turn on a projector. I have many concerns, and I feel like either the school hasn't thought a lot of things through or they haven't filled us in on a lot of things. Those are all the quotes that I collected. I think that it's great that 49% of the respondents were so positive. It makes me glad that some kids are getting what they want. At the same time, I feel dread when I think about going back to school on Monday, and it's not just me. You all heard directly from students, 50% of students, that this is not a plan for them. Ever since I was in elementary school, my teachers have been telling me that school is a place that I should feel safe in, and that has always been true, until now. As I wrap up, I want to send a message directly to the members of school committee. I may seem like just some teenager complaining about going to school, but this is real. I need each and every member of school committee to take responsibility for whatever happens to me and my peers when we go to hybrid. As members of school committee, we must hold ourselves accountable when students, teachers, and parents get sick. With 50% of high school students saying they're scared to go back to school, is this really a pro-student plan? If the motivation is social and emotional learning, maybe instead of focusing our energy on switching to hybrid, we should focus on improving communities within Brookline High and helping students form better bonds with their guidance counselors and deans. We are days away from going back into the building, and still students are fearful for what is to come. I asked this a month ago, and I'm asking again now. Please, 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 let's not rush this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear from voices on the ground, as we say. And I would hope that we can share this with our high school administrators. I think they need to hear this. And I know that in the lower grades, the teachers are spending a lot of time talking about what it means to be living in this time, what it means to be afraid, what it means to live through that, and how can we be helpful and supportive. And they're spending a lot of time on what we call in the lower grades, social emotional conversations, learning. And so I would hope that that would happen at the high school. I would expect it to. I think they've talked about it a lot. And I believe you're in SWS, and I know I've talked to Dan as well just this past week, and he also is very aware of some of these concerns. So we wish you well on Monday when you go back, if you're a Monday hybrid schedule. But do keep us informed of how this is going. Jim, did you want to say anything? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Claire. It's wonderful you come in with data and you ask that we really pay attention and listen to it. It won't be just the high school that we should be taking a look at that data, Claire. I think that's, I love that you gave both sides so we could focus on what should we be sort of focusing on that's really working, and what are the issues that we really need to address. That's very, very clear and greatly appreciated. I tried to take as many notes as I could, and I cramped up my hand doing it. And so I wonder if I could have your notes. Is that possible?
Definitely, yeah, I can send them to you.
All right, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire. So Jim, it's superintendent's report next, so it's your turn.
Yeah, the superintendent's report really is focusing on the K-8 schools is where I spent my time last week. And I met with the principals and asked them how things were going there. And so there are some very good things that are happening and some concerns. So the very good things are that the students seem to be very happy to be back in school. Teachers are delighted to be with their students. I went around to some buildings and I asked kids, are you happy to be back in school? And they're all giving me thumbs up. And this was just around Halloween. The teachers I spoke with seemed to be pleased that they're back with their students. So in fact, I was walking out of the Baker School with Torrance Lewis, the principal. He was walking me out. It was the end of the day, and we passed a student, a young girl, and she looked up at Mr. Lewis and said, you know, this is the best day I've had in 7 months. So that felt really good. And then when I'm listening to Claire, I'm saying we have some work to do there. So because the spirit that this young girl had was extraordinary. So all of that feels like very good, but there are some frustrations. And most of the frustrations center on not having enough coverage. We certainly have the funding source for paras and for substitutes. We just don't have any substitutes and paras who are applying. So there is a shortage, a pretty serious shortage, which is resulting in the administration spending most of its time covering classes and other supervisory responsibilities. And that's really not sustainable. Parents have been enormously helpful. Thank goodness for the parent volunteers. They have been enormously helpful in terms of providing some relief so that the school can run and the teachers can adhere to their schedules. And the other part, which it'll work through, it has to do with the lunches in terms of making sure the lunches are labeled appropriately so that they can be distributed and students can get the lunch that they in fact ordered. That's become a bit of a logistical problem that backs things up, that just adds another layer of frustration. We're working to smooth that out. But aside from those two things, the lack of paras for the supervision, that's a major issue. And I don't know what we're going to do about that. I spoke with a couple of other superintendents and they're experiencing the same thing in other schools. So the good news is that the smiles on the students' faces were terrific. And well, I won't get personal, sorry, Andy, but I did visit, the schools, and the principals, I would say, are tired and working very hard to make this come together. And the comment from the student, this is the best day I've had in 7 months, I think really speaks volumes. So that's my update report on what it's like to be in the buildings. And it would be good. It would be good. In fact, I think in the next couple of weeks, if the school committee had time, I think it would be really fun and a really good thing to do for the school committee to visit the schools when they're in session. So you can witness firsthand the hard work that the teachers are doing and how the students are adhering. Unlike Claire's report, Claire, I have to follow up to you, but unlike Claire's report, the students, the younger students are adhering to the social distancing. They are adhering to the safety protocols. They take it very seriously. And it's amazing to see how they seem so mature when they're putting their masks on and going around and making certain that they're distant from their friends. Of course, this class size is small, so that they're really spread out. But there's a good feel in all of the buildings, and my hat's off to the principals, really, who work morning, noon, and night to make this happen. So
Okay,
that's my report.
thank you. David?
On the staffing issue, are we looking into the potential of adding student teachers perhaps as a way to ameliorate the shortage of paraprofessionals?
Thank you. I should have mentioned that, David. Yes. Joe Russo and Michelle Herman have been in touch with the universities, Boston College, Boston University, and are looking at both student teachers and as well looking at college students who may be able to actually pick up a part-time job, given they're all remote, and serve as paras in our buildings as well. Michelle, did you want to add anything to that?
We have a consortium of 6 universities that are sending out information to their students this week and looking at their student schedules to see if we can work out having them available even a few days a week and sort of piecing together students to fill positions.
And we might also add that if you know of anyone in the audience themselves or know someone who might be interested in participating in Brookline Public Schools as a para, or they should call our HR department at Town Hall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We will talk more about the reopening of the schools in the fall in an update in just a little bit. Susan.
Suzanne?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So first of all, Jim, thank you for that. And it's great to hear that there are excited. Can you hear me? Everyone's looking at me.
It's a little muffled, but
Okay,
I
one second. No, 1 second. I'll take off the Bluetooth.
oh, okay. Yeah.
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. Bluetooth sometimes is. So thank you. It's good to hear that that the teachers and kids are having a good experience, and I appreciate that. I also just wanted to tie it back though to something that Claire said. And Claire, thank you for your feedback. I very much believe all of the data that you presented. It sounds very real. And I have a couple thoughts on that. One is that jitters are normal. It's like it's the first week of school because it is the first week of school in a way. And so that's normal. And then this is a year like no other. So everything on top of that is completely understandable. But that said, sometimes fear can feel really, really big, and it can be paralyzing. And so I guess I would offer a couple of suggestions, some of which are obvious, like, if people are really struggling, reaching out to a trusted friend, reaching out to a guidance counselor or a parent is important. I know that can sound unrealistic for some teenagers, but if it's an option, I think it is helpful to hear that there are adults on your side. And then I think there's a set of things that, everyone can do to be safe. And I'm hearing that if there's a concern about not necessarily people not adhering to safe behaviors. And so I just wonder, if there's something that about sort of, hand washing, distancing, double masks, face shields, being outside, unfortunately, is the number one thing we kind of hear from everybody, and staying home when people are sick. And I think there's a set of things that we're all needing to do. And so sometimes just information is helpful when people are nervous. And just being very specific about what is the sort of the source of fear, if possible. But again, sometimes it's just more generalized. And then I guess the final thing I would say is that there are a number of students for whom going back in person is not going to be the right answer. We know that about 1/9 of the K-8 students are in RLA. We have a similar, it's not an RLA at the high school, but certainly there will be students for whom being back in person for a variety of reasons isn't the right answer. And I guess I would just hope that everyone can kind of find a way to not only embrace that from an educational point of view, but just from a social point of view also. So anyway, I appreciate the information you brought to us. I believe it. There are some things that can be done and other things that can't. And so just thank you.
Dimitri, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I also wanted to say thank you to Claire. Claire, it was surprising to me to hear that close to 50% of the students are nervous. It would be really interesting to hear in a couple of weeks from you if you feel, or if to see if the survey is distributed again, whether those numbers go down, because I know that there are protocols that the staff and teachers have been thinking of. So I would love to see, once people are in the hybrid and guidelines and protocols and reminders have been put in place, whether feelings will have changed. So it would really be good to hear from you and the students again. And then my question for Jim, I am interested in visiting schools. How should that be coordinated?
Perfect. Perfect. Through me, Dimitri. It'll go through me. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it'll go through me so that we'll get them scheduled if you're interested in doing that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's great. Suzanne, could I say one more? Oh, sorry, Claire. You go, Claire.
Claire?
I just wanted to respond to what Susan said. I definitely hear what you're saying. I don't think it's really fair to classify the way so many students are feeling as jitters. I definitely think it's more than just feeling nervous. I know that you guys have a very different experience than I do, but you know, just even being on social media, I'm seeing photos of what happened when the 9th grade went back, which is less than half of 1 grade. There was already crowding. There's already people taking their masks off. You know, Superintendent Marini, I'm sure that that girl was having, you know, the best day in 7 months, but I also have to acknowledge that the experience of a high schooler is so drastically different than somebody who's in elementary school. And I'm sure that elementary schoolers and middle schoolers are doing a good job of keeping their masks on, but it's just a completely different ball game. It's just completely different. And I just don't think that reaching out to a guidance counselor right now or reaching out to a friend is really going to do much for the way high schoolers are feeling. I mean, talking to a lot of my friends, talking to a lot of my peers, people are genuinely scared and uncomfortable and feel bad for their teachers. They don't know how they're going to enjoy things like electives, like band. And I just want to make sure that going forward, we don't classify these feelings as jitters or nerves, because that's really just not what they are.
Yeah, I didn't mean that for everyone. I mean, for sure, there are some people that's true for, and for many, many people, it's not. So hopefully I was clear. I apologize if I wasn't, because I completely agree with you actually about that.
And I just wanted to clarify that and respond and just make sure that it's not, you know, underappreciated how strongly students are feeling and how different the realities are for high schoolers. And I've seen so many pictures from the freshmen going back and have talked to a lot of freshmen personally, and a lot of them were excited to go back, and then they got there and were hiding in corners because the hallways were so crowded. And so I really want everybody to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Claire. Jim?
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say, and I have to keep reminding myself of this, and it's something I really have to keep reminding myself of, and that is the Remote Learning Academy. So when I report out, it's going to be I'm reminding myself publicly, but I want to make certain that I speak to the Remote Learning Academy as well as the other K-8 schools and the high school, because what's happening in the Remote Learning Academy is pretty extraordinary. They established a school in, you know, the blink of an eye, and I talked with Meg this morning. She is very pleased with the way things are going, and she's looking at establishing a school council in the school to try to connect with the home schools. And she has challenges. The Remote Learning Academy has plenty of challenges in terms of the organizations that exist in the regular K-8 schools don't exist in the Remote Learning Academy. And so now that the school is operating and doing pretty well, she's looking at putting those support structures in place, like a PTO, like a school council, and facilitating communications between the homeschool and the Remote Learning Academy, because it's a one-year school, and that's now becoming evident. So I want to make certain as I go through with reporting or giving updates that I include that Remote Learning Academy, because it's an important part of our school system right now.
Okay, thank you. Mariah, do you want to talk about this now, or do you want to talk about when we have the update report?
What is this that you're referring to?
Well, I'm not sure. We're done with the superintendent's report. This wasn't really our time for a conversation about.
No, I know, but I wanted to actually respond to something that Claire said, if that's okay. Okay.
Now's the time to do it now.
Okay. I wasn't sure, Claire, if you understood one thing, or the students actually that you were reporting on understood one thing. I thought your report was so helpful because it exposes where, exactly to your point, communication isn't happening, and so people aren't hearing things. And I wondered, do the students know that they can go all remote? Do the high school students know that that's an option? Because I wasn't really clear. Like, it sounded to me like maybe some of those students felt like they had to be there 2 days in person, where they can elect to be in what's called the unit cohort C, which is fully remote.
No, I definitely think that students know that. I think there are just a lot of external factors. For example, a lot of students feel pressured by their parents. A lot of students who feel that they'll be missing out in school, that they won't be getting the same level of education that they would be if they were in school. Some people are nervous that if it's because it's more difficult to switch from remote back into hybrid than hybrid into remote. And so I think a lot of people feel concerned that if they're currently in hybrid and they switch into remote, then if circumstances get safer, then they won't be able to switch back into hybrid. So I think they're aware that they can switch. I
Okay.
actually know that they're aware, but a lot of them just are concerned about other things.
I just wanted to make sure that they knew. Thanks.
Good point, Mariah. Right. Okay, we are going to move into public comment. I have over 20. Some are familiar to us, so that's good. Many of us have already sent us emails. We get many, many emails, folks. That's great. We know what you're thinking. We can't respond to everybody. It just takes up too much time, I'm afraid, but we do get hundreds of emails and we do read them. So I do want the public to know that and for the educators to know that. We are going to limit the comment to 2 minutes. So David, if you would keep track of the 2 minutes and let us know when that is up, we would appreciate it so we can get through to everybody. And we also have a full agenda today. Some of the things that have happened recently, such as the strike on Tuesday, I believe that's not part of this. And we will talk in addition about our commitment to 6 foot social distancing, which is also very much a part of our program. And we do have a position statement on that, right, Mariah, on our website? Just to be clear.
Correct. It's on the front page of the website.
It's on the front page of the website, which again is our position statement on the importance of 6 foot social distancing in our schools. So I do want people to be aware of that. And with that, and I just thought I would add, just as kind of a point of reference, I don't know if people are aware, but 4 out of the 9 school committee members are in fact teachers or have been teachers and have been members of the union. And just so that people know that we do come with that background. And so we understand some of what is going on. I know we'll hear a lot tonight about it. Okay, we are going to hear from Alexia Thomas and then Astrid Allen. Alexia.
Good evening. Thank you so much. My name is Alexia Thomas, and this is my 15th year at BHS as an associate dean and school counselor. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of over 100 educators whose children attend Brookline Public Schools, either as residents or through MECO or as part of the materials fee program. We wanted to let the community know about another area where trust between educators and the district has eroded. The topic of our public comment is childcare. I will be reading this letter with my colleague, Astrid Allen. In Superintendent Marini's first meeting with the BHS community in early September, Marini stated that the district would make in-person supervised remote learning available to our children 5 days a week. We were grateful for the commitment the town showed to us at the time. The commitment that was suddenly and unexpectedly rescinded as we shifted to hybrid 3 weeks ago. We were promised safe and appropriate childcare solutions for our children, and then we were left scrambling at the last minute to figure things out on our own. I started surveying educators via email to estimate the scope of need and was overwhelmed by emails from educators who felt abandoned and forgotten. All we wanted was for our children to continue to stay at their elementary schools while we continued to be able to work. We trusted that the district would provide supervision for our children because they said they would, but verbal promises aren't enough. Even now, as we speak tonight, the situation is changing. We were emailed yesterday that 12 spaces for our children would be open today. While we are grateful, we are still worried. We want to trust this offer, but how can we? How long is the offer good for? How many people will it serve? We need an MOU that includes childcare and supervised remote learning in writing. I will now pass the microphone to Astrid Allen, my colleague, for part 2.
Astrid, are you there? You're on mute.
Oh, I am unmuted now.
Yes, you
Hello?
are. You're okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So sorry. My name is Astrid Allen, and this is my 14th year as a BHS Spanish teacher and a member of the BEU. I am a Brookline resident and proud parent to a first grader at Heath. In continuing with my colleague Alexia, the last minute solution of Clark Road does not feel carefully planned nor a safe solution. The Clark Road classroom space will mix 12 students who are spread across all 8 elementary schools from grades 1 to 8 together, all in one space. These students all have different schedules and will be supervised by one adult. We imagine this is especially hard for our youngest learners in the 1st and 2nd grades who need hands-on support, particularly as the curriculum for the early grades is 90% asynchronous on their remote days. Mixing students from multiple schools is listed in the highest risk category of DESE guidelines for the spread of COVID-19 in schools. This resolution to a potential staffing and space crisis not only puts our own children at higher risk for COVID-19, but also their classmates and teachers in their respective schools. We appreciate that the offer of Clark Road is something rather than nothing, but have never been given adequate information from the district why our children can't remain at their home schools. With many class enrollments lower due to Remote Learning Academy, we don't understand why our own children can't remain in their original classrooms or have the possibility of using the cafeteria, auditorium, library, or gym as a space to go to on their remote days. We understand this requires staff supervision. However, if you are finding staff to supervise learning spaces at Clark Road, why aren't these staff being used in the buildings? In conclusion, for our children who attend Clark Road, these are our concerns. They don't have access to free school breakfast or lunch on days they attend. They will not be able to access asynchronous music lessons. They will not be able to practice their instruments. They will not be able to participate in asynchronous physical education. There is no plan for MASC or movement breaks given the lack of staffing. According to the recent letter from Casey No Miller, she stated that they will have recess outside unless weather does not permit. Is the staff aware that every student has a different schedule with a different lunch and recess time? Who will supervise outside time if there's only one staff member at Clark Road? The safer option would be to offer our children spaces at their own schools. Superintendent Marini, school committee members, and K-8 principals, please, we urge you to consider a better solution for our children that takes into consideration the current health and safety standards we are all facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Astrid. Kayla Nicholson, you are next, and then Gretchen Thompson after that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Kayla, go ahead.
Great. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. First, I'd like to read a letter distributed by the BEU to members and families. We, Brookline educators, have been coming into the school buildings every day to teach the children of Brookline. For months, we have been working productively with the school committee to reach an agreement that allows us to continue to keep the buildings open with children and adults in attendance. Last week, our efforts to conclude an agreement was derailed when the school committee refused to commit to a 6-foot distance between student seats. This was foundational to our months of negotiations, since all other safety protocols rest on the assumption of 6-foot distancing. We need 6-foot distancing, a widely agreed upon measure, so that we can be with our students, something we embrace as the best part of our job. The school committee says that they want flexibility to be able to change the distancing between students. We have proposed ways to adjust the 6-foot distancing going forward. All have been rejected. As people on the ground, we need to be partners in decisions affecting children and educators. Families, please tell the school committee that their firm commitment to 6 feet needs to be in the agreement. So that was the end of the letter. Now I'm going to go off the record for a little bit with some of my thoughts. Do you remember earlier tonight when Claire reported that students are not socially distancing? That came from a student. Susan and Dimitri, you both agreed that procedures may help ease the high school anxieties that Claire talked about. If you put a distancing procedure in the agreement, it will be there as a solution to help ease the anxieties. If you don't put anything in, it's not a guarantee to be implemented. social distancing will be far more likely to be adhered to if a distancing protocol is put into the agreement. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Kayla. Gretchen, you are up, and then Kira Flynn Carson after that. Gretchen, you can go ahead.
Might want to make sure that you're not on mute.
No, we lost her.
Perhaps we can go to the next speaker and then go back to Gretchen if she gets back on.
Yeah, okay. Kira, you are next, and then Jess Carson after that.
Hear me?
Yes, we can. Kira.
Okay. My husband is scheduled to speak right after me. If you want to let me go 1 minute extra, this is a joint statement, so you can skip him and go back to Gretchen. This is my 20th year teaching in Brookline. This length of time has given me broader context, an important factor in critically examining this current moment. So allow me to pan out before I narrow back in. In the past 7 years, we have had 5 different superintendents. We have also had extremely high turnover rates in central administration and building administration. This lack of stability has impacted our trust in the superintendent, in the folks on the 5th floor, and in our school committee. This flux has made it impossible for these leaders to truly understand the perspectives of their school-based staff. Another important bit of context is the problem of our overcrowded schools. Back in 2005, Bill Lupini first spoke of the impending overpopulation crisis that the district needed to prepare for and manage. Yet it was mismanaged to the point where we have had to cram students into every nook and cranny of building spaces, and specialists have provided services to students in former storage closets. District leadership did not solve this problem, and yet the teachers and students found ways to deal with it, albeit in very suboptimal ways. This too eroded our trust. In recent years, teachers have worked without a contract because contracts were allowed to expire without efficient, open, and fair negotiations. It wasn't this way in the first half of my tenure. Several years ago, the district made a meaningful commitment to restorative justice. In this work, we address harm that has been done and collectively work to repair it. Over the past several years, harm has been and is still being done, and that harm needs addressing and repair now. I'm a trusting person by nature. I want to trust you, but I can't. The context won't allow for it. Yet at this moment, I have never needed to trust you more. I teach at BHS, my husband teaches at Pierce, and our daughter is in 4th grade at the Ruffin Ridley School. I am depending on you to keep my entire family safe during a global pandemic. You're asking me to put my faith in you, and yet you won't sign an MOU that mandates 6 feet of distance. Why? At the same time, an elementary school teacher reported that when a student in their class tested positive last week for COVID, they were not notified. They were merely asked for a seating chart the following day when students had already returned to school. We're relying on you to protect us with better contact tracing. Alexia and Astrid already talked about the childcare issue, so I'll just say that many of us are not in a place where we can trust you enough to drop our kids off at Clark Road on Monday, and yet many need to. I want to keep my family safe, my colleagues safe, my students and their families safe. At minimum, what I need in order to feel safe enough to be back in my room is 1, very clear language requiring 6 feet of distance in the memorandum of agreement, and 2, notification that when any student in my class tests positive for COVID, the fact that you have hesitated in doing so just erodes more trust. You have stated a 6-foot policy verbally, but we have seen too many things threatened when they are not in writing. You are our leaders. Individually, you may not have caused the erosion of our trust, but if we are going to move forward and build a strong working relationship in this anxiety-provoking time, you are the ones responsible for repairing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. Gretchen Thompson, are you there? Would you like to try again?
Hello, am I on?
You are on. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you for the chance to address the school committee and central administrators. I'm Gretchen Moran Thompson, an educator with 20-something years of experience. I'm a graduate of Brookline High, the former Devotion School, and Brookline Rec's Soul Center Preschool. I have been part of the town's labor force for the past 19 years, serving as an English learner educator at the Lincoln School. During my time at Lincoln, I have worked with 7 different principals, 7 vice principals, and 6 superintendents. The people providing the stability and consistency for students during all of this turnover, dragging the school system forward, have been the educators in our building. I ask that your actions and decisions support me and other educators instead of making the work more difficult. Right now, I need a signed MOU in order to be able to best focus on my work with students. They can't get my best when I have to worry that their and my best interests aren't being considered. This fighting to be able to focus on my important work with students and families didn't appear with COVID or the current need for an MOU. It has been happening for years. I have regularly worked without a current contract, even for over 3 years, and then having to start all over again right away because you dragged the process out for the entirety of a contract's life. It's exhausting and damaging and has contributed to our being where we are today. The effects of constantly having to fight for reasonable learning and working conditions are far-reaching. The work I do is not only part of my life's mission, it is also how I make my living and support my family. They need me to have something left for them. I have hobbies. I have a neighborhood community to support. I need sleep. I resent the lack of respect and consideration shown me when I have dedicated so many years of my personal and professional life to the deserving children who have come through Lincoln School. As you have told us educators countless times, make it work, figure it out, and we have. It's your turn. Put the 6-foot distancing into writing, the 6 feet that allow us in reality to maintain 3 feet during the real school day. If you face challenges sticking to it, figure it out, make it work. My hope and request is that you listen, really hear what I am sharing, that you reflect, and that you find ways to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Rich Levine, you are next, and then Susan Below.
Suzanne, did we miss Jesse Carson? Wasn't he going to speak after Kira?
Well, that was Kira's husband, and I thought she said she was speaking for him, but
He's in the attendee list too. I just don't know. Sorry to interrupt on the person
I'll circle back after.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Rich, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Our daughter's a 6th grader at Driscoll. We would like to express our support for the teachers and the request to have a 6-foot mandate. And equally important, we support having the teachers be part of the decision-making process and working collaboratively with the school committee to decide on policies that directly affect their safety. With the election a few days ago, and obviously still ongoing, it reminds me of the reasoning behind the changing and making the voting age 18. The reason way back when behind that was that that's the age at which a young man back in those days could be sent to war. And if they're going to be sent to war, they should certainly have a say in who their commander-in-chief is. Similarly, teachers are on the front lines, and they should have a say in policies that directly affect their own safety. It's one thing to make policy behind the safety of a Zoom meeting, but it's an entirely different thing to make policies when you're on the front lines. I think that the input of the teachers, which they could offer right now based on being in the schools, would be an invaluable asset to the school committee with everyone's safety the concern. I like to say that one of the most undervalued things in life is common sense. I can't tell you how many times I look at a situation and say, where's the common sense in that? To me, it is simply common sense that the school committee would want input from the very teachers who are literally putting their health and safety on the line by being in school with the students, as well as being responsible for the safety of our precious students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Susan is next, and then Jess Carson, you can be up if you still want to speak. I'm confused about that. So.
Thank you. school committee, Dr. Marini, my esteemed colleagues. It's an honor to share my thoughts with our public schools of Brookline community, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. As a 25-year veteran teacher at Baker School, I'd like to think that I've almost seen it all. I hope to pass along some of my institutional wisdom and experience and perspective here. So we find ourselves at an impasse this week, a turning point, one that I'm hoping we can resolve together quickly. We've been unable to move forward with the memorandum of agreement regarding social distancing. We need to advance the previously agreed upon understanding that 6 feet of social distancing in the schools is followed, is respected, and is firm. Currently, the school committee and superintendent look to supersede this understanding and reserve the right to change the 6-foot social distance rule without teacher or staff input, discussion, negotiation, or agreement. They've set themselves as the arbiters of our health and safety. This position adds undue stress and psychic harm in an already historically challenging era. As teachers and staff stand on the front lines, we're at increased risk of contracting COVID-19 merely from teaching in the schools. We teachers do not have the luxury of orchestrating lessons and learning safely from the comfort of our homes. Rather, we face a much more direct risk incurred by leading our students through a real and frightening global pandemic. This deadlock we face is unnecessary. None other than Dr. Anthony Fauci, head of the United States Centers for Disease Control, recommends at least 6 feet social distancing. Aside from my mother speaking from across her grave, I can think of no other authority more widely and universally respected than Dr. Fauci. His advice and warning last week that our nation is in for a lot of hurt is unambiguous. As we brace for flu season on top of the COVID crisis, which is on the rise in most states, it is the height of hubris for anyone, especially any of us who does not have the letters MD attached to our name, to dispute Dr. Fauci's recommendation. We hope that in this academic year, we might see his recommendations change and his strict guidance relax, and I will happily cross that bridge when we finally come to it. But for the present and near future, the 6 feet social distancing is set in stone in Dr. Fauci's words and in writing. Central administration has prioritized students' social and emotional health and wellness as our first priority in this school year. We teachers have gladly agreed, but an analogy is fitting here. Just as flight attendants remind passengers in an emergency to pull on their own oxygen mask first before aiding their children, we educators need to protect our social and emotional health so that we have enough energy to aid our students. The stress and disrespect we're experiencing as a result of this turning point is draining. We want all of our energy to be intact for our own families and for our dear students. The school committee should want the same in step with our peer school districts, Boston, Newton, Wellesley, Weston, and myriad others. Additionally, in our response to the COVID crisis and our nimble pivot to online and hybrid teaching, we educators model skills vital to success in the 21st century, namely humility, flexibility, and collaboration. We show our students that a growth mindset helps us learn and master new skills such as teaching with Zoom, Padlet, Pear Deck, and Mentimeter. And if you're unsure about any of those tools, visit a Brookline Public Schools classroom. We show our students that practicing humility, the precious trait so common to the greatest generation that puts selflessness above selfishness, is what builds community bonds. We show our students that with collaboration, we can figure out the most vexing problems and celebrate in finding solutions in the shelter of each other, for we are stronger together. I admonish our school leaders to take these same lessons to heart, to return to negotiations with the Brookline Educators Union, and to regard our safety as sacred, paramount, natural, and the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Jess, are you there? Carson?
I think Jesse hung up, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, Lindsay, excuse me, Lindsay Litton, and then Ari Newell. Lindsay, you're right there. Thank you.
Hi, yes, good evening. My name is Lindsay, and I am a parent of 3 students who go to school in Brookline, 6th, 4th, and 1st. I am a resident of Brookline for over 10 years, and I am also a freshly new paraprofessional within the Brookline High School. And I just want to be just honest with you guys tonight. I've heard for over many years, I always used to hear so many good things about Brookline education and the Brookline school district and how everything is always on point. And I'm just being so fresh into this. I'm just shocked and appalled at how everything is being handled in such a time like this. These students want to be in school, they want their education, but at the same time, it's very difficult for them to speak out because they don't feel like they're being heard. Neither us as paraprofessionals or educators. It feels like everybody is just doing what they want and just letting things by and just letting how things go. However, we want this 6 feet distancing is not, and as firsthand being in the school is not being enforced by anybody, any of the teachers or anybody. I have firsthand witnessed many of the 9th graders gathering out into the blacktop together in groups and no one saying anything to them, as I am a paraprofessional teacher teaching my students about distancing in their classroom, and they're looking out the window seeing all these students just gathering together, masks on, masks off, and nobody saying anything to them. And it's just hurtful, and it hurts because we're trying to teach my high-risk students about distancing and about doing what they're supposed to be doing and staying on top of everything. And at the same time, they're questioning us about why are these students not doing what they're supposed, why is nobody telling them that they should be 6 feet apart? And that's not okay. We can't barely even get out the classroom with students standing in the hallway. Yes, they put stickers on the floors for people to make sure that they're distanced, but they don't follow that. I have been inside the school where students are walking around together in groups, just listening to music and doing whatever they want to do, and nobody is enforcing anything. I am a parent of a single mother of 3 kids, and I refuse to continue to try to put myself at risk and to come home and have to also put my kids at risk because yes, I need to work. I have to pay bills. I have to make sure that my kids get their education, and I have to make sure that the students that I work with get their education. But it's very hard to do that when you don't have the higher authority who is not in there, in our shoes, walking the halls that we walk, and the classrooms that we're in. Nobody is there to see the things that we go through. And I think it's something that needs to be done. And if it can't be done, then we should have started remote, and we should have went into a hybrid and phased into hybrid. But it seems that just went over everybody's head. And I just want to be able to be real and not sugarcoat anything, because I know that so many people are probably afraid to speak and afraid to be real and afraid to be able to speak their minds. But I want to be that one to be able to say, things are not going the way that people are perceiving it. Things are not going the way that people are saying. I want to be that one to firsthand and tell you, these kids are not 6 feet distancing and nobody is enforcing it. And if that's how it's going to be, I guarantee you, if you continue to bring more kids into these schools, whether it be K through 8 or high school, things are eventually going to get shut down and we're going to be in that cycle again. And if that was the case, then we should have started remote, phase into hybrid in different sections of grades, and maybe by next year everybody would have been in person. But it seems that things are being thrown around and people are just trying to make things happen, and that's not okay when you have people's lives at risk. People are scared, and I think that we need to come together as a community and get it right. And I want people to really know that Brookline School District has it together. We really have it together, but right now it's not looking like we have it together. And I just wanted to be very honest with you and not have to sugarcoat nothing. And I thank you for this time.
Thank you, Lindsay. Ari is next, and then Heather Pritchard.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
All right. Hello, my name is Ari Newell. I'm a BHS senior. Fellow Brookliners, in the light of recent events, I would like to make a few points about the committee's refusal to incorporate a social distance clause in the memorandum of agreement between it and the Brookline Educators Union, as well as the committee's avoidance of proper negotiations. It is unfair to teachers, students, their families, the rest of Brookline, and frankly, the rest of humanity to allow premature abandonment of the measures so crucial to public health. I'm not the first to state that the committee's recent actions suggest not only that they are giving themselves carte blanche to further loosen these measures, but also that they fully intend to take actions that will endanger thousands without the science behind them. I have been a participant in the Brookline school system for 12 years, and in those years, I've probably seen 12 teacher strikes of varying lengths on problems of varying importance, but not once can I remember the teachers having anything less than an absolute moral high ground. This is even more obvious today, as several committee members seem to be in denial over the fact that some people are worried about a disease that has killed 250,000 Americans and is growing at an unprecedented rate, in part because of the return to in-person instruction here and elsewhere. The supposed smiles and best day in 7 months comments are not grounds for subjecting the people of Brookline to COVID-19. Like Ms. Litton said before me, Brookline schools were supposed to be better than this, and Brookline deserves much, much better. If I haven't made this clear yet, I recommend that the committee formally enforce social distancing in the memorandum of agreement. Our safety measures must be firmly and inextricably based on the science in order to pick up the slack from the many other levels of government neglecting public health. Giving leeway to packed classrooms would be a callous action and antithetical to the duty which all administrators owe their constituents. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Ari. Heather, you're up, and then Acacia Landfield.
I believe the good can come from disagreement. Disagreement helps define us as individuals, and it has the power to broaden our understanding of each other. This disagreement is not the ill-informed, inward-looking, dismissive disagreement we're all too used to. Instead, it's the kind of disagreement that requires us to step back, be quiet, and genuinely listen to others, especially those with whom we disagree. It also requires us to be vulnerable with the hope that others might begin to understand us. So here's my start to what I hope can be a good disagreement. Superintendent Marini and members of the school committee, I want to trust you. I also hope you can understand that the experiences I've had in this district over the last 2.5 years are preventing me from trusting. Last spring, I was riffed along with hundreds of my colleagues. Each year I have been in this district, I have seen the amount of time I have to plan and support my students decrease. The demands of preparing lessons for hybrid learning are forcing me to make compromises, which result in sacrifices to my students' learning. Over half of the middle school core academic team that I teach with has less than 3 years experience at our school, because teachers come and go so quickly. Last spring, I had to say goodbye to a principal that I deeply respected and appreciated. I want to trust you, but I feel like your decisions don't signal that you actually care about me, my students, or our Driscoll community. To be honest, I've spent a lot of time recently feeling really angry with you. I also believe that we cannot trade away our integrity for the chance to dismiss someone with whom we disagree. That's why I'm hoping that this evening you can acknowledge my experiences, explain your motivations for not wanting to make me and my union joint partners in decision-making, and extend the same trust to Brookline's educators that you ask of us by putting 6 feet distance into writing in an MOA. In return, I will do my best to listen to you.
Thank you, Heather. Acacia, you're next, and then Sarah Scott.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the time. My name is Acacia Landfield, and I have 2 pre-literate students and have been a classroom teacher for both middle and high schoolers, though it was many years ago. What I'd like to say tonight is that context matters, science matters, and cookie cutter approaches do not work. The biggest existential crisis for public education ever, and it's beyond heartbreaking that this is where we are, especially given what we know about the tribalism and the divisions in larger society. We are better than this. We all care deeply about safety and pandemic resilient schooling. This is our only choice for at least the next 18 months, if not longer. We are arguing over nuances and risk tolerance, but we need to stop the hyperbole and the fear-mongering. We all care deeply about our own children, their teachers, staff, and the school community. Let's all remember that this is our community's health and our own health as well. We have to leave behind the politics. I have a question for the union, and it's a rhetorical question, for the union and the teachers who used parents' private emails for a political purpose, which is a breach of trust which left many, many parents feeling a mix of confusion, discomfort, anger, and incredulity. Since the union discouraged teachers from participating in the expert panels during the spring and summer, resulting in zero teacher participation on those expert panels, how many union members and teachers who supported this cookie cutter policy for the strike actually have followed Panel 4's expert guidance? It's extremely detailed, it's exhaustive on literally every topic and facet from every public health angle that exists. And it's all based in science and very specific metrics. They know how to address nuance. Scientists and epidemiologists widely agree that there is no magic number. So why are we trying to create magic? Be more cautious when unmasked. Do 8 or 9 feet, but use context and use the science. Having the cookie cutter approach to all times of day for all ages of kids, regardless of things like size of room, ventilation, masking, is not based in science, nor is it based on what's happening on the ground from what many teachers fully recognize. Nor is it reflective of what the vast majority of private schools, charter schools, preschools, and daycares are doing. Do a poll if you don't believe that, but it's known fact. We don't need the cookie cutter approaches that don't serve anyone and keep kids, including pre-literate ones, from accessing their education and development for 18 to 24 months. Even factoring in the age of kids is important here. Be more cautious with the middle and high school kids since they get sick as easily as adults and transmit like adults. But elementary kids, especially the youngest kids, cannot sustain this. They are also far less likely to get sick and far less likely to transmit. We know this, the world knows this, not to mention that we all know how extremely mask compliant the young kids are. So I have 4 solutions I'm sure have been discussed, but number 1, prioritize getting elementary kids whose social and emotional learning is so severely impacted with pre-literate kids first and foremost. Number 2, do more distancing than what is currently happening when kids are unmasked, for example, when eating. Do 8 feet if you want, or more. Parent volunteers are there for the lunches, or go back to the original plan of releasing kids at 1 p.m. with no lunch. Anything is better than pre-literate kids being completely on their own for 40% of their learning. These kids are flailing, they are falling apart, hating school, getting physically sick from the screens. Please address their needs. Number 3, let go of politics, let go of cookie cutter approaches that disregard all context and widely agreed upon science. Let Panel 4 lead because they are world-renowned health experts in our community. And number 4, trust science and let the scientists lead. It's their job and it's the only way we can continue for the next 18 months or more. Thank you.
Thank you, Akeisha. Sarah Scott, you're next, and then Ryan Black.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah Scott, and I'm the parent of 2 students at Lincoln. I'm speaking today because I've grown very concerned about the culture of distrust that's become so pervasive in this district. I realize my time this evening is limited, so I'll focus on my most immediate concern, which is the refusal by the school committee to codify a commitment to keeping 6 feet of distance between individuals in schools by including it in a memorandum of understanding with the teachers union. Teachers are rightfully concerned that if this condition is not guaranteed in writing, they could be changed at any time. I'd be surprised if the teachers did not insist on this provision. The teachers have contracts or MOUs to ensure that the district remains committed to standards that they have promised. However, what seems to get little attention in this matter is the fact that if the district is not willing to codify this commitment to teachers by putting it in the MOU, then the district is not committing to the promise it made to students and families to maintain 6 feet of distance within the buildings. Since the reopening blueprint was first referenced in August, parents and caregivers have been assured that there would be 6 feet maintained at all times. In the district's August 14th reopening blueprint submitted to DC and currently posted on the district's reopening hub, it specified that, and I quote, any student or staff that is returning to in-person settings must follow these guidelines. Among them, 6 feet of physical distancing must be maintained by students and staff at all times. School Health Services states that classrooms will be arranged to maintain 6 feet distance between individuals. Families have made decisions to enroll their children in either the hybrid model or remote learning academy based on the assumption that 6 feet of distance will be kept between everyone except in rare situations. As a parent, when I hear that the school committee is unwilling to include a commitment to 6 feet of spacing in the MOU with teachers, it tells me that you're also not willing to keep your commitment to students and families. We're all aware that best practices in the age of COVID are constantly changing and that it's entirely possible for social distancing guidelines to change between now and the end of school in June. Of course, it's reasonable to change these practices as we get more and better information about this virus, or if a vaccine becomes widely available, etc. It's reasonable that the school committee and the administration don't want to be locked in to parameters specified in the MOU. But it's really not that difficult to include language that allows that portion of the MOU to be revisited if or when a certain threshold is reached. For instance, when new guidelines are released by the CDC or by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, you could set a time frame to revisit, for instance, in January and April. An unwillingness to be locked in shouldn't prevent the school committee from making a commitment to faculty, staff, students, and families that a safe distance will be maintained in the school building. I urge you to include 6 feet distancing in the MOU. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Ryan, you are up, and then Umut Ozkan.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Ryan, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I'm here, same reason as everyone else, but yeah, I mean, please include the 6 feet protocol in the memorandum of agreement. It's not enough for the school committee to verbally say they intend to maintain 6 feet, regardless of the committee's intentions. It does not inspire trust to say you are firmly committed to 6 feet while also being against putting it in writing. It's not like this is a strange thing to ask. Other districts have done it. And the school committee should want to do everything possible to improve trust between the town and teachers. Not too long ago, 300 teachers were pink slipped, and which is they were told they were expendable and left in limbo for what was it, like a month? And as one of the previous commenters noted, like there was also a promise about childcare that was rescinded. Teachers have every right to not trust a verbal promise. You all have to understand the fear that to not put 6 feet in writing is to effectively, it's like they're seeing as like you are all reserving a right to drop the protocol at will. I mean, think about like no one here would agree to a lease or a mortgage if you didn't have like an agreement with your landlord or bank in writing. Teachers deserve the same. They're equal partners, and any discussion about safety protocols, I mean, they deserve to be a partner in it. And putting 6 feet in the memorandum ensures they will be involved in those decisions. Any changes to protocols like the distancing requirement should be bargained with the union in a transparent and collaborative process. The teachers should not be in a position where their fate and safety is entirely in another entity or person's hands. They have a right to negotiate the terms of their employment. And to close, I want to note how the teachers have not once said, don't listen to the science or don't listen to the scientist. Heck, the teachers want to codify the science in the memorandum of agreement. They've even said the union is on board with social distancing guidelines being subject to renegotiation as public health guidelines change. And I also think it's worth noting, that they deliberately chose to strike in a day students would have off anyway, like ensuring no one lost a day of learning. I think that, and like I said before, the union being on board with social distancing guidelines being subject to renegotiation as guidelines change, that all to me says the teachers are operating in nothing but good faith. And I think, like I said, it would be a good way to build trust between the town and the union to include 6 feet in writing in the memorandum of agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Umut is next, and then Cecilia Martin.
I think that both of them have left the Zoom.
Okay. Tom Stahlcup is next then. And after Tom, Amy Newell.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Tom. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm a parent here in Brookline. I have a student who's in 4th grade, a daughter at formerly Devotion, now called Ridley. And kind of changing the subject here. Well, first I want to say, wow, it's my first school committee meeting ever listening to. And it seems a bit, I don't know, disheartening, I guess, the disconnect between the teachers and the school committee. So I hope that gets fixed or amended in some way. And of course, coronavirus plays a big part in all of this. But the thing I want to talk about is something different, basically staring into a screen. And that's pretty much what the kids were doing during Zoom learning, and actually sometimes during hybrid. And I find it, I had to sit through, my daughter was not having a great time with it, and she was having headaches. And I then learned that one of her friends was getting headaches. I did a little research online, and it turns out that headaches and other adverse health effects were going on or happening across the country, even with the college age students. And so I just saw it as a very negative thing. We're trying to keep our children off of screens, and here you are saying, stare at a screen. We're going to stare at you to make sure you're staring at a screen, and don't stop. And that just, that just seemed completely opposite to what I was trying to do with my child. I want to get her off the screens as much as possible. And when she gets off of the Zoom learning, they want to go to watch do their favorite video game or watch their favorite show. And it's just screens all the time now. And of course, without the opportunity to visit their friends outside, there's a lot of screens anyway. So I just wanted to say my main point is that I'd like to make sure the school committee keeps, if it's not already, a choice for parents to have the choice to have students independently learn without anyone looking through their computer to make sure their child is staring at a screen. If that's a requirement that's going to be in place, I just think that the school committee should reconsider it. And if it's not a requirement and it is already a choice for parents to have the choice of having their students learn independently, to keep that choice available to all parents and students. And lastly, I'll just say, very impressed with Claire and all the other students, or the other student that spoke today, and all the various perspectives, and everyone has a point of view that I hope is listened to.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Amy is up next, and then Ohad Kushner.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Amy. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Amy Newell, and I have lived in Brookline since 1998. My children have always attended the Brookline Public Schools. You heard from my son, Ari, earlier. He is in the all-remote option at Brookline High. My daughter would be in 8th grade at Pierce, but we're choosing to homeschool her this year, and we expect she'll return to attend BHS next year. I recognize that our family is in a position of incredible privilege to be able to keep our children at home. We chose to do so this year for the same reason we now support the Brookline Educators Union in their push to require a commitment in writing to 6-foot distancing in the schools. Our priority is to protect the community overall during this crisis. Keeping our children home makes in-person safe schooling safer for those families who need it, as well as for the teachers and their families. Because we want to protect the community, we also stand with the Brookline Educators Union in their demand to be full partners in all decisions about safety in the schools. Our educators did not sign up to be on the front lines of a war our national government is frankly not even bothering to fight. The country has now surpassed over 100,000 new cases of COVID per day, and yet people continue to press schools and teachers to get back to business as usual, putting their own lives and those of their families at risk to teach our children. I've never met a Brookline educator who didn't want to do the best job they could for our children. They've shown incredible flexibility, creativity, and devotion to our students, and they've done it under truly crippling amounts of stress. Our teachers deserve to be honored and respected for the unbelievable work they're putting in at this time, and they deserve to have our support when they tell us what they need to teach our children as safely as possible. I trust that if and when updated science-based guidelines on school safety are available, the teachers will work diligently to adapt to them, because I trust that they want to do the best for our families as well as for their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Ohad, you're next, and then Celine Seliam.
Hi, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the school committee and all the educators that spoke prior to me. We're dealing through unprecedented times, and I have just the utmost respect. Nobody knew that we'll be in a year like this. I actually want to voice a slightly different view, given that I'm not part of a pool or a union, et cetera, but I do speak to a lot of parents I live in South Brookline, and I'm a parent of an 8th grader and previously two kids who are now college age. Both went to public schools here in Brookline. And the thing that worries me, honestly, and made me come here and speak at the school committee meeting for the very first time, is that I'm seriously worried about the lack of trust and a little bit the erosion of the brand that we have in regards to the teachers, which, as many of us know here in the town of Brookline, is a major reason why people live here. And the concern that I have is, given that we're all in this together, in this pandemic, both educators and parents who are sending our kids to school, the concern that I have is that we have to codify certain engagements, such as 6 feet or 4 feet, when there's an overarching common sense that applies here to everybody. Everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants to be healthy. And the fact that we have to codify just the way that we work is a major concern to me. I know that people that tend to speak in meetings like this are biased one way or the other. And I simply want to voice the fact that in discussions that we have with many teachers who are huge and staunch supporters of our teachers, we feel like this is an erosion of some of our trust, and honestly, to the educators on this call, some of your brand as well here. I just want to end with this. One of the things that taught us during these unprecedented times is that we also, with everything bad that's going on, we also now are cherishing our healthcare workers, our doctors, our grocery workers, our pharmacists, et cetera. And I really am pleading with the educators on this call and those around you that, with all the utmost respect that we have, and I have immense respect in the work that you're doing, please don't erode that brand, so that we can really think of you as we always have, as heroes on the front line. But the fact that we have to codify every single engagement of work is of utmost concern to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohad. Celine, you are next, and Graciela Mohammadi is after you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Celine, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I have 4 kids in the Brookline Public School, 1 in kindergarten, 7th grade, 10th, and 12th grade. I would like to second what Acacia Lanfield said, as well as Ohad Kushner. I really feel that we should keep politics away from these important decisions, and that a cookie cutter approach might not be adequate for a kindergartner and high schooler who have very different needs and different risk factor. We need to have our kids in school like the rest of the world, who have been back in school since May, even in countries with worse mortality rate than here. Private schools have reopened safely with some flexibility for several months without causing any major COVID outbreak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celine. Graciela, you're up, and then Ann Collins.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Graciela Mohammadi. I am a Brookline resident, a parent of a Brookline High School student, as well as a teacher at OLS. I am very disappointed in the fact that the school committee seems to be so adverse to putting the 6-foot distancing into the MOA. And I was a silent observer yesterday in negotiations. And so I know that you are still, even after 900 educators of the Brookline Public School system called out sick on our PD day in order to say just how important this is. I was extremely disheartened yesterday to go and sit through and listen to negotiations in which nothing, no 6-foot distancing, nothing to be codified into the agreement was proposed by the school committee. It was heartbreaking as a teacher. I have spent thousands of dollars of my own money in order to make hybrid work. I have cried more days than I can count just because of the stress. I have lost 40 pounds in the past 4 months due to stress alone. That is the place where your educators are right now. We are tired. We are sick. And we can't trust you if you won't give us even a crumb in writing. We want to be with our students. We already are with our students. We are in those buildings every single day. This isn't about whether or not we want to be in the buildings or not. We are in the buildings. This is about whether or not you can put extra students in our classrooms without us even being told about it, without us agreeing to it. Right now, we are working so hard to make 6 foot work. With the 6 foot distancing, my students can turn and actually talk to each other. They can show each other the work that they're doing. I can walk down in between the desks and see what they're working on, and I can help them if they need it. But without that 6 foot distancing, what you're looking at is a sterile classroom where every class would have to be on Zoom because every student would have to be facing forward. We're not asking for 6 feet because we think it's a magic number. We're asking for 6 feet because that is the socially acceptable parameters that have been guided by science. If 6 feet is what we need to have in a hospital, then why the heck don't we have it in a school? We want our students to succeed. We want hybrid to succeed, but we need you to give us something that can help us allay the anxiety that we have. It's not okay for our teachers to be crying every day, and I'm not the only one doing it. It's not okay for us to be wondering how the schedule is going to change tomorrow or what classes we are going to have to teach. It's not okay for us to be told what room we're teaching in the day before we're supposed to get in there. It's not okay. And not codifying 6 feet into our MOA isn't okay either. Thank you.
Thank you, Graciela. Ann Collins, you are up and you are our last speaker tonight.
Okay, great. My name is Ann Collins. I'm a librarian at Brookline High School. If you are indeed going to visit the schools, I urge you to visit the school libraries. I'm also a parent of a 2013 graduate of BHS and a current senior at the high school. I've been at Brookline High School for 17 years. In those years, I've seen a number of superintendents come and go, but I've never experienced the disregard and disrespect towards educators that I have felt from the school committee. Last spring, amid the fear and threat of COVID-19, the school committee, at the urging of acting superintendent Ben Lummis, laid off 370 PSB educators. I was one of them. At a community forum organized by the Brookline Parent Organization, the 2 attending school committee members, when asked by the moderator, why issue pink slips in the amount of $20 million in savings, more than triple the size of the deficit? The answer was a desire for flexibility. Similarly, flexibility is the stated reason given by the school committee for refusing to agree to 6 foot distancing in writing in the MOA. Acting Superintendent Dr. Marini, in an interview with WBUR, states that taking any action that would limit our ability to adapt is irresponsible and would fly in the face of science and fact-based decision-making. This statement implies that negotiating with the BEU would be inconvenient. What is irresponsible is not allowing educators via their union to negotiate any changes to the MOA. If the superintendent is allowed to make a unilateral decision regarding health and safety in our school buildings, there is no binding MOA. In my 17 years as an educator in Brookline, I have never seen our union membership so united. Roughly 90% of the union's approximately 1,100 members voted in favor of this strike. Do you have any idea how hard it is for a teacher to decide to strike? We don't want to strike. We want to teach in buildings that are safe for ourselves and for our students. We want to be respected for our expertise and listened to at the bargaining table when conditions change. On the eve of our strike, regarding on the eve of our strike, Ms. Fetterspiel is quoted in the Brookline tab regarding the BEU. If they don't strike, then it will all just end. And if they do, it goes to the Department of Labor. We had no choice but to strike. I'm proud to teach in Brookline. I always have been. I'm also proud of my union. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, that concludes public comment. Take a deep breath. We will certainly bring some of this up and when we talk about the reopening. And we also will bring some of this up during executive session because it's part of our bargaining work that we have to do in our negotiations. Okay. I'm not seeing any comments. We'll move on to the special town meeting warrant articles. David, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right, so the last time that we discussed warrant articles, there were two that we did not take a vote on. Those two are the one involving greater participation in the town-school partnership and also on school stipends for school committee members. I'll begin with the second one first. I did hear back from town council about whether it would be appropriate for us to be taking a position on the school committee stipends warrant article. It was very clear from my conversation with her that she recommends we not take a position on it because of state statutes involving conflict. More specifically, the conflict would be that those of us who are not up for re-election this year would essentially be opining on something that would affect our ability to make income. And so it would not be appropriate for us to either endorse or not endorse that measure. So my recommendation would be that we listen to the advice of town council and that we not discuss further the school committee stipends warrant article, which effectively would mean that we're not issuing a recommendation one way or the other to town meeting. If that is the will of the committee, then that would leave us with just the town school partnership warrant article and the new language that has been crafted around that, and whether we would like to endorse the most recent version.
Could you just explain some of the difference between the revised version and the first version?
Well, do we have one of the petitioners with us? Perhaps it would be best.
Cliff. Yeah. Cliff, would you like to say a few words? Put you on the spot.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm not a petitioner. I guess what I would say is that the warrant article has evolved since our last meeting, and the principal changes which have been put in and have been approved by both the select board and the advisory committee at this point are changes that frankly address some of the concerns that were raised by the school committee and others during the initial process, which is more or less to tone down some of the whereas clauses, but essentially leave the resolve clauses unchanged. And I'll just again say that both the advisory committee and the select board have agreed on language that, from what I can tell in the combined reports, is the select board's version. It's really not a clean version in the combined reports. David Lescoyer, I think, is here, and as a petitioner, I would really turn over to him to make any additional comments. But I think there seems to be a clear consensus between the advisory committee and the select board on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Well, I think that there's been one material change that particularly I would draw the school committee's attention to, and that's in the third, and last time we left it, that we weren't really, the school committee wasn't really, didn't want to take the time to review all the whereases, but focus on the now resolves, the action statements. And the third one has been revised somewhat, and that was actually it's at the select board, one of the select board members sort of put a stop on the process, referred it back to a member of the advisory committee, John Doggett, who had served as chair of the Administration and Finance Subcommittee. We had a session, John and I, to iron out some of the concerns and the whereases. And one of the things that he added that I think is quite important is he added the Fiscal Policy Review Committee, both to the whereases and to the now resolves. And this, I think, strengthens this warrant article substantially, because in looking back, and I wasn't really aware of that, and certainly not when we drafted it, looking back at the history before 1994, there weren't really any financial policies. And there was an effort at that time, because of concerns that had existed then, not that different than the concerns now, that the town really should lay out a set of financial policies. And among the suite of policies that were developed at that time from 1994 to 1996 was the town school partnership. And it's unique among the suite of policies because every other one of them has run into trouble. And the Financial Policy Review Committee met in 2004 to examine and make recommendations for modifications. And then again in 2011, during the midst of the financial crisis, the Great Recession at that time, that caused further anomalies and problems that needed to be addressed. And right in the language of the town school partnership, it says, as conditions change, it shall be reviewed. It hasn't been. So more than ever now, along with all of these others, it's time to review because there are problems with that, as with the other policies. Now, a couple of years ago, Sean Lynn Jones, as chair of the advisory committee, had put forward a resolution which was directed to the select board to create the Brookline Financial Advisory Committee, which was done. And this was really the next generation of this effort to review policies. And it's again, because the policies are breaking down, particularly the free cash policy. Our financial policies is a three-legged stool. It's policies on reserves, policies on capital finance, and policies on free cash. And free cash, which seems so simple, is actually the driver of the whole matter. And so I think that we sort of fell into, us the petitioners, into an issue. Because I was holding my breath after reading that report in January, the Financial Advisory Committee report. So when are we going to get going on this? When are we going to roll up our sleeves? And Cliff and Mike Stoffel and now John Doggett have come and sort of expanded this and made it something that we can bring to town meeting and put a town meeting and the school committee also on record. Is there are 18 recommendations here in a more than 100-page report. It's a little bit broader than the prior review committees, but needs to focus on the same concerns because it's almost predictable. The prior reports called for a 3 to 5 year life cycle for the prior recommendations. Here we are from 2011 to 2020. It's 9 years, so it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David Perlman.
Yes, well, I appreciate that explanation, David. Thank you for coming on and explaining some of the revisions that were made. And thank you, Cliff, as well. I have reviewed the new language. I'm sure that many of you have also reviewed it. I'm currently comfortable with the language. I think that it's expressed in a more objective manner than it was previously. I don't think it's casting aspersions on any particular group or individuals. And I think that it's stating the reality that we need to have more formal mechanisms in place for coming up with evaluations, that we need to do a better job at transparency and at communication of explaining how the town school partnership works. So I would recommend that we adhere to the recommendations of BFAC that are embedded in this warrant article, and that as a school committee, we endorse that town meeting pass warrant article 33.
Do I have a second to that motion? Thank you, Andy. Are there any questions or comments before we take a vote? Seeing none, I will take a vote. Helen?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Dimitri?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, Cliff. I appreciate it that you came in. Do we need to vote on Article 37? Or you're not bringing it to us? We can't, right?
Not vote on it.
Right. Okay, got it. Okay, we're going to move to the reopening update with Dr. Marini.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. There are a number of areas that we're going to be presenting this evening, and we're going to start off with Erin, who's really going to give us a rundown on the choice that families made regarding the hybrid and the remote learning academy, and give us some numbers and implications of those moves at this point. And then Casey is going to she'll segue over to the children of teachers and the work that has gone into trying to find sufficient places for the children of teachers while they're on home on the remote days, and the teacher has to teach. And then Michelle's going to talk about a really difficult one for us to figure out: quarantine students and how we're going to continue their education. So why don't we start with Erin and take us through. Erin, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Let me just share my, oh, Robin, could I share my screen? Thank you. All right, great. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit more, I'll provide you a little bit more information on the number of students or families who have made the decision thus far to change their learning model. So that's either from a fully remote to a hybrid model, or from the hybrid model to fully remote, whether that's at the high school or in the remote learning academy. The enrollment period was last Wednesday through tomorrow at noon. So there still is a little bit of time for families to make their decision, but we will close the survey tomorrow at noon. We will give families one additional opportunity to make this switch. We think that will be somewhere around February vacation or before February vacation. So students come back from vacation in their new choice. But again, that's kind of still TBD. For this first round, principals are receiving real-time data for planning purposes. So when a family fills out their form, principals get alerted on a spreadsheet. It has everything aggregated for them, so they can see which students in particular are in aggregate leaving or coming, and also individually which students are leaving or coming, so that they are continuously planning for this, since we really only have next week to be able to provide families and students and teachers and staff their placements. And we've talked about this you know, throughout this process, there will be potential, or there is potential for some staffing changes based on these request numbers. So if we have more students requesting to transfer to the RLA in grade 5, for example, and we need to open another section, that will mean consolidating classes at one of our brick and mortar schools in order to move a grade 5 teacher over to the RLA for that particular new class. Again, there's potential for that. You'll see the numbers throughout the presentation that will show whether or not that's completely necessary. So as of today, around 54 students were asked to transfer to the hybrid model. So these are students who are completely remote right now, who want to go into the hybrid learning model. There's 15 students from the high school and 39 students from RLA that want to move from remote to hybrid. And then much larger, we have 215 total students who have asked to move to completely remote. So these are students who are either currently in the hybrid model or in grades 10 through 12 at the high school and want to go completely remote, or students who are in one of our K-8 schools in the hybrid or fully in person if they're kindergarten, who want to go to the remote. So that's 130 high school students and 85 students moving to the RLA. So here's the information by grade level. You can see that it's, you know, it really varies across the grades. The first column there shows you what grade level I'm talking about. The second column that says to remote, these are the number of students that want to remove to a remote learning model. You can see those numbers are really high at the high school, and those grade breakdowns are much higher in 11 and 12 than they are in, for example, 9 and 10. And then a little bit higher, I would say, in grades, you know, 3 through really 3 and 4, 2, 3, and 4, than in, well, I guess it's kind of even across the 3 through 8. And then moving to that third column, these are lower numbers. Again, these are students who are currently remote that want to move to hybrid. Kind of varies across grade levels, with the highest movement being in grade 8. And then that last column there just shows you the change at the remote level. So I'm trying to highlight here what the difference would be for specifically the RLA, but also you can see the high school change as well in terms of how many students they would either be losing or gaining in each grade level based upon these changes. So when I look down towards the bottom, the total change at the K-12 level is 161, and then the total change at the RLA would be 46. So 46 new students coming into the RLA on November, I should know this date by heart, 16th, I want to say, 13th? Yeah. 16th. 16th. Thank you. And then I broke down the Remote Learning Academy numbers a little bit more so that we could see sections per number of students for each section. So again, that first column is going to show you the current enrollment by grade in the RLA. So you'll see that total number of around 600 students in the breakdown of those 600 students. Second column, number of students who want to transfer out of the RLA. Third column, students, I'm sorry, second column, number of students who are transferring in. That number is much higher than the third column, students who are transferring out. Taking all three of those columns into account, you can see the new RLA enrollment by grade level. And then that final column, each of the grade levels, except for grade 5, have 4 teachers per section. Grade 5 has 3 teachers per section. So that will show you the new number of students by section for the Remote Learning Academy. So you can see most of those numbers, the highest we have are 21 in grade 3 and grade 7. Again, these are still preliminary. We do have until noon tomorrow for families to complete the form. But right now it does look like we would be okay in terms of our staffing and our class size at the RLA if numbers remain the same. And similarly at our brick and mortar schools, the numbers of students transferring out of RLA are not that high. And again, you see it's 39 and that's dispersed across 8 schools. So thinking about adding new staff to our brick and mortar schools would not be necessary at all at this time. So just some next steps. I know I'm going through this kind of quickly, but again, the survey closes tomorrow at noon. School leaders are working with our EL special education and guidance staff to make sure appropriate services follow the students, whichever direction they are going. We're also asking our school and district leaders to look for potential consolidations at home schools. So we've talked about this a lot where, especially in the hybrid model, at our home schools, there are potentially, 6 to 10 kids, or even maybe sometimes less than 6 in a class because the classroom is split in half. Can we consolidate those classes, utilize staff differently, potentially provide some more support for the RLA with those larger class sizes, or certain needs like literacy specialists or coaches that we moved into teaching positions? Can we now pull them back into their coaching or specialist role so that students and staff are provided those services? And then families and students will receive their new placements late next week from their new school leaders. And again, this was mentioned in the letter to families, but we cannot guarantee certain hybrid cohorts or teacher placements at any point when we are having these open enrollment periods. So that's all I have for you on that particular topic. I imagine there's some questions before we move to Casey and Michelle.
Are there questions, comments, thoughts? Mariah?
Thanks, Erin. That was really helpful, informative to understand what's going on. I have a question just about sort of the rationale for considering consolidation and sort of or if you could discuss the trade-off or the benefits of not changing things around versus potentially changing things around. In a year that has a lot of change, it seems like it's a big decision to sort of make another change. I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, right now we're just asking principals or school leaders to identify where it could potentially happen. I think the challenges that you're thinking about are ones that we are as well. It's students, it's now November. They didn't really start in-person school until October. They're just getting used to their teacher. Would we actually want to switch their teacher, right? On the other side of that, we've talked a lot about those small class sizes in the hybrid model, and Michelle can probably speak to this a little bit more in terms of what teachers need based on their contract for not release time. What's the word I'm looking for? Sorry.
Prep.
Prep. Thanks, Michelle. I don't know if you want to speak to this more, Michelle, but I think it's, mostly around providing the services for students as well as moving staff potentially back into their roles. Like I said, literacy specialists could now do pullouts with students if they're currently serving in a teaching capacity. But go ahead, Michelle.
I think there's several things to it. Scheduling with the additional cohorts being split has been very difficult for schools, and it does impact how we're able to give teachers prep. I think the intervention has definitely been impacted, although there are fewer students in the classroom at any time, which allows the teacher at the tier 1 instruction to spend more time. It's definitely impacted the ability for our specialists to be focusing on intervention solely, or to be available to classrooms for intervention. So in those 2 areas, it would provide a lot of relief at the school level. But as Erin spoke to, it does disrupt the fact that students have made relationships with their teachers and been able to, be working through a structure with the teacher and students that they're familiar with.
Well, and I just want to add too that principals and teachers spend a lot of time creating that sort of delicate balance when they assign students to classes, and having to consolidate classrooms takes another level of work to think through in terms of combining students where there may be, just certain dynamics at play, and also needs too across the board. English language learning needs, special ed needs too.
I do think one additional benefit could, like I said during the presentation, is potentially providing some additional support to the RLA if we're consolidating classes. You know, you saw the numbers there of 17 or higher, in some cases 21. There's, you know, potential for some additional support that could either be provided to those teachers or those students who are seeing, you know, 20 plus kids on a Zoom every day.
Thank you.
Claire, did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
I was kind of thinking. So I have one question that's sort of off the top of my mind. I'm not sure if I missed something, but so I'm confused because at the high school, a lot of people have been saying that you can switch to remote at the end. If you're in hybrid currently, you can switch to the remote at the end of your first week. And so I'm kind of confused because that's what I've heard from everybody and that's what's going around. And I was just unclear about what like the reality of that is.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the high school, we'd have to look at that, Claire, because we had it set up that there were certain times where people could make that move. So, you know, I would have to look into that to provide some clarity, because we have set by calendar the times that people can make that switch, because it's very disruptive. So we have set that in place. So if there were adjustments to schedules or whatever, when students first enter school, that the high school had to make individual adjustments, then they may have done that. But the actual time to make a change from your first selected option really was now, and it's going to happen again in February. So that's good to have you on this panel, and we will circle back so that we make sure that we're consistent.
Yeah, I just wanted to that's just what I've heard students have been saying a lot. So I just wanted to understand if there was any if that was based in anything. And then also a question I just have about being in hybrid that I've heard this question come up with a lot of different students is with attendance. So if somebody is signed up for hybrid, but doesn't want to go into school that day, is it possible for them to just sign into Zoom? Because a lot of people have been asking, and I've heard a lot of different people saying different things about whether or not that's against the rules or okay. And so I was just wondering about that too.
Well, there's a time to switch, and again, now I just want to qualify myself a little bit here in terms of the high school. The high school has a different system set up in terms of their remote learning is being done differently than the K-8s are. The high school is actually running groups A, B, and C. And so they're doing simultaneous teaching, and that may allow them to have that kind of flexibility that you're talking about. That's not the case in the K-8 schools, because you're in cohort A or B, and you come in on different times, and just switching back and forth because I don't feel like going to school today, I'm going to do my work remotely, is not part of the system. Yes, Susan.
Suzanne. No, absolutely. I guess the only other thing I would say is if people are feeling not well, I think everyone's been really clear that there's a much higher bar for staying home. So if you have a sniffle, if you have a cough, even if you just, are just feeling out of sorts, I think this is exactly the time to take that very seriously. And so, that's one of the biggest shifts, at least for me as a parent. I think for all of us as a parent is if there's even a hint of a sniffle, stay home, and the educators will figure it out. So not to take anything away from what Jim just said, but I would just say that's a really important piece to keep communicating to people, because that's how we all stay healthy.
That would be a different consideration. That's right. Suzanne, I'm taking over here. I don't mean to. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, no, I'm going to do Mariah, then Helen. So Mariah.
I just wanted to maybe clarify a little bit that Anthony Meyer and Hal Mason sent out an email today to parents, high school parents, that and I just want to read a couple of sentences from it because it might help clarify a little bit of what you referred to, Claire, and what you were saying, Jim.
Yeah.
Is it says that the deadline referred to in the recent district communication for changing models does not apply to BHS students. A key component of our model is flexibility, both for students and teachers who temporarily need to stay home, sick, or quarantine, some of what Susan was saying, and thus receive remote instruction with the same teachers in the same classes, and to allow students to move more flexibly back. And one of the things they say is, I'm just skipping a couple lines, but while such moves cannot be made instantly, we endeavor to bring back students back into in-person learning as space and conditions allow. And so I think it's sort of not what you're talking about, Claire, yet about, I don't feel like coming to school today, but it does allow for more dynamic response. So
Thank you, Mariah. You
yeah.
can see, Claire, the high school is operating on a different concept of the moving from remote to the hybrid. And thank you, Mariah. I'm going to ask Anthony to clarify that a little bit more with us as well, so that we know what we're doing here.
Helen, did you want to say something?
And no, I was sort of following up on what Mariah was saying. I didn't, get that message, but it seems to me because there's that ability to be flexible at the high school because of the way they've arranged the schedule and the way that students are attending school, whether in person or remote. You're all in the same class either way, if I get that correctly. And so teachers can take attendance, kids can be there. And I guess, I don't know. I mean, I understand you can't have more kids in hybrid than sign up because, well, no, even that, it doesn't matter because
the high school, the high school, it works. That's why we have to be a little more explicit about what's happening in the high school. They're operating under a different model.
And I think flexible too, because I think it's going to work out either way. I mean, the issue is that the students get their education, and the manner that they get it in, I think it helps if they have some choice, especially for what Claire was saying about feelings of not feeling secure. Well, maybe today is not a good day for me to be there because my anxiety level is through the roof because the numbers have gone up or whatever. And tomorrow I can handle it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we need to think about being flexible with that.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, there's no question. It just really boils down to the high school is operating under a different model. Mm-hmm. And the high school kids, I think, have a little more independence as well.
Yeah, Claire?
I also just am kind of curious why these dates were chosen, just because how are students supposed to make an educated decision or parents supposed to make an educated decision when they haven't even experienced hybrid yet to make the switch? So just I'm kind of confused of why this date was chosen the week before high schoolers even go back.
But it doesn't apply to the high school. That's what the email.
It doesn't.
Yes.
Does it not apply to ninth
That's what I believe. The email that I was citing said it doesn't apply to the high school.
Yeah, Anthony is taking that into consideration. Yeah.
Okay, Jim, who's up next? Who's going to present next? I've lost track.
Casey.
Casey, go ahead, Casey.
Yep. So I don't have slides, but just a quick update. But before I give my update, I just want to speak to some of the comments that we heard earlier tonight during public comment. I think there was a question about why materials fee and students of Brookline staff couldn't remain in their home schools once we move back to the hybrid model. And I just want to repeat some of the factors that went into our decision making. One is the learning environment. It's not as easy as including a student into their original homeroom. It's not meaningful learning to have students in their classrooms accessing remote learning while their teacher at the same time is teaching the other cohort. The other reason is staffing and spacing. Not all of our schools have the staff or the space to supervise remote learning. I know that there was some questions about using the common spaces in the schools, such as gyms and cafeterias. And I can tell you that every inch of our school buildings are being used when students are in the building because of the 6-foot distancing. When the weather is not good, we're using those common areas to have indoor recess. So spacing is definitely limiting given the new health and safety protocols. So when that decision was made, we did work to look for other options, and where we have landed now is the rooms. We have 2 classrooms at Clark Road. They have desks and chairs that are appropriately spaced apart. There's easy access to outside space, restrooms. There's hand sanitizer, hand wash. The classrooms have sinks in them, and it's, there are windows. They were, former classrooms. They were offices for some of our staff, but they are ready. They were open today. We hired 1 person. We do have 1 other position to be hired so that we can open both classrooms up. The spaces do hold 12 students each. Today, we did not have anybody signed up. We do have a couple of students tomorrow. And then the numbers, I keep getting reservations, if you will, requests for spaces for next week. So we do have staff signing up. We've been in communication with staff about the Clark Road spaces. And of course, we'll continue to better the experience as we go and learn. I do want to add one other thing, actually, that some of the constraints mentioned by the earlier commenters, that space for phys ed and music for remote learning, those constraints would still exist if the students remained at their home schools. They wouldn't be in their classrooms to begin with, and the gyms and cafeterias really wouldn't be available. So we'd run into the same constraints even if the students were in their home schools. I guess lastly, I want to mention that we're in a year of finding good solutions when the best thing or the thing that we want just isn't possible. It's a good faith effort on the part of central administration with school committees support to find supervision for the students of our educators and our residents who work in town and in our schools to facilitate their work in our classrooms.
Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, Mariah?
I always have questions. So is this provided at no cost to the educators, or is there any cost to them?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's no cost.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and actually just one more question, just to clarify. You said it was a reservation, but once someone is in, they're in, right? They're not like it's not like, it's the same sort of kids in the classroom day to day, like depending on their off cohort days, right?
That's right. I probably
Okay.
shouldn't have used the word reservation. I have teachers who've emailed and said, I'll need the space for my 2 kids every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because they're cohort A, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dimitri and then David. Dimitri, go ahead.
Casey, I just was wondering, can you tell me how many students in total are in need of that service? And then how many students can the 2 classroom hold at Clark Road?
Sure. So as of right now, I don't know. I have had people who have contacted me who hadn't in the past. So I don't know exactly what that number is. As of last week, I have 17 students, fewer families because some have multiple kids, but that number may grow.
Okay.
In terms of capacity, we have 2 classrooms, and because of the 6-foot distancing, we can fit 12 in a classroom. We do have other offices that are currently being used by curriculum coordinators who were formerly at Webster Street, who are graciously willing to give up their office space so that we can have more rooms. The other piece is hiring the staff to supervise these rooms.
So technically, if I understand it correctly, we would not be able to meet the need of all 17 children or families we need. Right?
We could easily meet the need because these 17 students are split between 2 cohorts.
Okay.
So on any given day, we'll have 8 or 7. The
Okay.
question is, after this meeting, will I be flooded with more requests?
Okay, great. I understand that. Thank you.
David, did you want to speak? And then Helen?
Yes, just if we could get a little more clarity around the noon deadline tomorrow. Does this apply to grades 9 through 12?
The deadline tomorrow, I don't know what you're referring to.
And that's for Erin.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
okay,
talking
sorry.
about the learning model switch?
Right.
I'm going to close the survey at noon tomorrow. That's the district-wide survey. So in that sense, yes, but it sounds like the high school plan is a little bit more fluid. So I would urge high school families to read the communication sent by Principal Meyer to get more information around deadlines for grades 9 through 12.
So the 9 through 12 clearly is going to have to follow Anthony's plan on that. But Erin, did you send out reminders for people?
Yeah, so there was a reminder sent on Tuesday, and then there was another one sent today this around noon that reminded folks about the 12 deadline tomorrow.
Okay.
Helen?
So I'm just thinking about the Clark Road and the 2 classrooms and the capacity, which sounds like about 48 kids total, because you have 12 Monday, Tuesday, 12 Tuesday, they're different kids. You only have 12
sure.
kids in this class, but you're servicing 24 over the week in one class.
That's a good point, Helen, yeah.
And then, but what I'm not clear about, there's a couple sort of tricky things, because if they're all a Monday, Tuesday cohort, then there's a problem. And I don't know how, hopefully they fall out, well in terms of that, or they may need to change their cohort, in schools where there's the ability to do that. That's number one. But number two, I was thinking about Wednesday, and Wednesday, everybody's remote?
That's correct, yeah, and it's a half day.
And teachers too, or just students?
So I think teachers, I'm unclear actually, because I think it depends.
It does depend.
Yeah.
Some
Okay.
teachers, I'm sorry, Casey. No, sorry.
Yeah, but the spaces are open, so I do have teachers reaching out asking for Wednesdays, and some have not.
So if you were to accept the full 48, and assuming they fell out right, Wednesdays would be a problem.
It could be a problem, correct. Right now, the numbers aren't high enough. I'm hoping that we can have staff hired so that we can be ready to go rather than wait until somebody's hired.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you for trying to solve this serious problem.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know we've talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah, I'd like to make just a quick comment if I may, Suzanne.
Sure, Jim.
Yeah, that Casey, who has been leading this, has really been in contact with Mary Ellen as well, and looking at trying to be very creative in using some of the town buildings potentially, or trying to find some creative way to accommodate the teachers, the students of teachers, because we see it as a need in the system that we would like to meet. So Casey, the work that you have done, finally bringing it home, and with the cooperation of people who are occupying the space and moved out of that space to allow for this to happen, I think speaks highly of the work that you have done. So thank you for all that you put into this.
Yeah, thank you. And then who's speaking next? Jim? Michelle, you're on.
Yeah. Michelle's going to talk about, as we move along, we discover more and more issues that have to be addressed. And because we are, all of us, sort of having to solve problems that we hadn't had before. And so these are new problems, and the solutions sometimes are a little elusive. And this is one I think that is pretty challenging. So Michelle, why don't you take us through it?
Sure. Okay. So I am going to talk about students who need to be quarantined, who can still be attending class per se, that they're quarantined, but they're not actually sick. And so let's start at the high school. As Claire was talking about before, the high school has the model where you can float in the ability to be in cohort C. And so if students are unable to attend school, they can still attend their classes as they would if with their cohort. At the kindergarten level, we are going to be working with schools to use their paraprofessionals to support students who are at home because of our current situation with them being full in the class. Then what happens is they're not using the learning management systems in the same way that the 1 through 8 students are. So that's the high school and the kindergarten specific. At the 1 through 8 level, students who are quarantined would still attend their morning meeting and their closing meeting with the classroom because those are available to all students in the class. So the whole entire group, not both cohorts, always come together for that work. The students who are quarantined on the days that they would be remote will get their instruction through the learning management system. They'll be able to get the same assignments that teachers are using with students that are in the classroom. And then they would come with their full class on the remote Wednesday. And then on their remote days, they would participate in the full schedule as the remote. So it's really the 2 days that we're concerned about that they would normally be in the school building. If there is a classroom that is completely quarantined, then those classes would just move to the full remote setting. I think it is challenging, as Jim talked about and Aaron talked about before. It's challenging because we are struggling with filling the para positions and the sub positions to have people available to be directly constantly interacting with students who are quarantined. And I think this is why we're thinking creatively with some of our staffing model about how do we have people who can directly interact with students who are quarantined. So it's a conundrum for us right now. We're going to continue to work on it. One of the other things that we are doing sort of some studying around is the ability for students to Zoom into classes on the days that they can't be there. And that is really in more of a testing zone right now. We don't have consistency across the district of that going on in grades 1 through 8. And so we're not ready to say that that's a go-to for students who are quarantined.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions? Yeah, Helen.
Thank you because this is hard. This is really hard stuff, and you know we're we're reinventing the wheel every time we move a bit. But I do think we need to move as much as possible towards the Zoom, the owls, whatever method we can manage to include those kids who are quarantined in their classroom or with their classes, whether it's in the classroom.
I just want to be really clear about the owls. They are coming, but they are not available for potentially up to 8 weeks from now. So I just want to make sure that we're not depending on those in for our quarantined students until we have them in hand.
Okay, thank you.
So Michelle, I'm just trying to think, is there any way, but this may not work at all, that a quarantined child might go to the RLA class for a bit?
Yeah, so, you know, I can see why that would be, you know, an option. I think it probably depends. If right now the quarantine is really probably 10 school days, 1, 2, 3, 6 of which a student has options to be directly with their class in the remote setting because that's the normal schedule. So it really only leaves them 4 days that we're working. You know, I think if quarantines were to become longer, then we need to discuss some other options.
Okay. I mean, I can see problems with it, but on the other hand, RLA is already doing remote, the kids can access it, so I don't.
Yeah, I think the problem is more like, are students in the same place in the content? Right. Would they be starting something in the middle? Would they have missed content because their class is doing it and RLA has already done it? So there's just, you know, there's a lot of things to look at. But,
yeah. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. David.
I have a question about study hall periods in the elementary schools. Just wondering if you could elaborate about the purpose of study hall, what takes place during study hall, what that's a substitution for.
So I would need to look into that a little bit more. Currently, the scheduling that we have done with schools did not directly include scheduling a study hall. So I would need to do a little bit more looking at an individual school that might be having a study hall.
I do know, and I don't know if David, you were referencing this. I think Baker had to do that a couple of times recently because of staffing availability. So a teacher had to be out, and some classes had to be shifted around in the middle school.
All right, so this is not something that's regularly scheduled, but more of a temporary situation?
Not to our knowledge. We can certainly get you more information, but that has not been in any of the schedules that we have seen.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and I think that plays to the conversation before about substitutes and additional paras.
Barbara, that's Susan. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask for a little clarification about substitutes and how we are doing in getting them, because as we move further along into the colder weather, we're going to need them more. Are we having any luck in getting them?
No, is the short answer. And as I said, I've spoken with a couple of other superintendents who are feeling the same. I know in one town, they had in the center of town a giant board that said, paras and substitutes wanted, please apply to the school department. It's something that's affecting everybody, but Chris in Human Resources is working really hard on that, and she's been able to secure some substitutes, but nowhere near the sort of pool that Brookline is used to having. And the para pool is exceedingly thin. There's nobody there really. So we need to keep mining that field and not give up on it. And, you know, if there are parents that want to come in and maybe be a para, you know, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. But then wouldn't have to be just volunteers.
What are the requirements for being a para?
Well, they're not, you don't have to have a teaching degree or any of that. I'm not even sure you need a college degree.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
you don't.
You do not. No, you just have to go through the Corey and the fingerprinting and stuff, security.
Yeah, Barbara, and then I think Susan had her hand up.
Yeah, I want to follow up a little bit with the substitutes. Do we have any plans in place concerning what we will do if the substitutes are not available on a particular day, or we need more substitutes than there are substitutes to have? How are we going to deal with that?
Well, I can tell you that a week or so ago, we had Michelle, Casey, and Joe act as substitutes for the day. And it's, I even offered myself. I was very excited about becoming a first grade teacher, which is not in my wheelhouse, but I was excited about that. And I was told I wasn't needed. But that's right now, that's our backup plan. The principals are literally, the principals are spending a lot of time on coverage, and central office administrators have helped with Jen Buller on one occasion and have, you know, generously offered themselves for when it's necessary. So it's all hands on deck right now.
Susan, did you want to make a comment?
Oh, just two really quick things. One is, I think different schools, just back to David's point, different schools do have different schedules. So some of the middle schools have a class, you know, a period called When What I Need,
Yeah.
and some of those they can act like study halls. If you don't need anything, then you sit in a room and you do study hall. That's what it was. That's all it was been like for the last couple of years. And that seems to work pretty well, because if you need something, you go find your teacher during that time or whatever it may be. So I don't exactly know how they're working this year, but I can imagine that's the only other thing I can imagine that people might be reacting to. The only other thing I wanted to ask was about the owls, and every school is different on their schedule and on when. Just on the owls, I think one of the things we were talking about was, you know, are the cameras going to be K-8 also, or just the high school? Are we going to order some just to kind of get it started and have people experiment with it, make sure we actually want them. They're pretty expensive. And, you know, we want to give our teachers everything they need, as long as, you know, that it's something that they want. And so I know they've been tested a little bit, but I think we were going to try to get like 10 of them and just try them for a while before ordering, you know, hundreds. But I don't really know what happened with that, because I know the ordering process might make that prohibitive. So I just wanted to kind of check in and see how that went.
The hiring, the ordering process, it was a little complicated, but we're going to pass that tomorrow. And we're ordering 50 of the owls, where half will go to the high school and the other half will be spread out through the K-8s. There are teachers in the K-8 schools that would like to experiment and try to use the owl. They're very intrigued by it. And there are certainly high school teachers that want to use it. It's the new technology that seems to be user-friendly, and Hal would say plug and play, and it's very effective. So yes, it's going to go to the K-8s as well as the high school. Excuse me.
Okay, Jim, anything else? Is there any other presentation on reopening update?
No, I think that, you know, we're going on a whole bunch of different fronts, and it's both, you know, exciting and exacerbating, because we keep running into situations we haven't run into before, and we have to sort of resolve them as quickly as we can. And sometimes when we do that, we didn't consider all factors, then have to do a little bit of a makeup call. So I will say that as thin as the central office staff is, the group, everybody's doing double duty, and everybody's helping everybody else and sort of backing each other up. So the spirit around it is, I think, sky high, very much appreciated. But the anxiety of not knowing what we're going to deal with tomorrow is persistent. And but we've kind of, I hate to say it, but we've kind of adjusted to that. You know, when I go into the morning, I look at Betsy and I say, what am I dealing with today? And out comes all the stuff that we're dealing with, and then we gather people. So we've become pretty adept at dealing with the unknown. I just wish that, you know, some of the efforts that I think are sincere and very effective somehow could be more well-known in the efforts that people are making to serve the needs of the schools, because we do operate from the sense of we're here to serve, not be served. And that's been our foundation. That's what we talk about. That's how we behave. And sometimes that's, the central office should be unseen, so to speak. They should be in the background doing the work and you know, really not being highlighted at all, on the one hand. On the other hand, the level of work that this group is doing on a daily basis, I really wish others could see a little. I think they'd have a little bit of an appreciation for how hard, and it's to serve the needs of the schools. That's the big thing. So other than that, Suzanne, that's our update.
Yeah, thank you. Helen?
Oh, one thought that maybe for our next meeting, Jim, we might invite Trish Laham in to talk about what happens with quarantining. There's been a lot of discussion in the community, and I think if she could just make sure that we all know the protocols, and by us knowing, the public will know too.
Yeah,
I think that would be a good idea.
I think, Helen, that is really, it's almost clairvoyant there. That's a great segue or question, because I was actually on the phone with Trish today with Casey, because she too is dealing with, as she does contact tracing, for example, other issues arise. And so she's now thinking, well, how am I going to deal with this? It's a communication issue. When there's a positive case, how much is that communicated? Where is the privacy, and how much should be communicated? Communication sometimes can lower the temperature and anxiety, but communication can also violate privacy, where it's a difficult. So she's dealing with that. She should definitely, I think she would very much appreciate coming here. She's already met with the principals, and she's walked through the protocol and the process with the principals, but we should definitely, Suzanne and David, when we meet to do the agenda, if we can remember for Trish, I think that's a very good suggestion.
And Jim, are there places on the website that show kind of, I know she has a whole flow chart of if this happens and this happens, is
Yes.
that available to the public?
It should be available to the public.
It's on the Health Services website.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we could urge people to do that. We've all gotten emails saying, what about this case and what about that case? And unfortunately, we don't know about the case.
Well, that's the other thing that I'm trying to actually memorialize, that I talked with Trish today in terms of that the superintendent's office gets the daily update of any cases, but that update should go to the school committee, FYI. We're putting that piece in place. So you should probably see coming across your inbox every morning. And I don't know the time because I don't know when Trish would do it, but every day you should get something on your email that just is an update on, and there may be no change, but you'll see the update.
Yeah. I mean, just to let the public know, we as a school committee actually don't have any daily workings with children in schools or staff. So I don't know who has it. It's a privacy issue, as you said. But we also don't know if, it's a student in the school or if it's somebody who's in the neighborhood or if it's somebody, I just have no idea. So.
No, what you will get, you won't get a name.
No, we shouldn't.
But you might get something that says there was a positive case in a hybrid. There was a positive case in a remote. And usually when it's out of the remote, it doesn't need contact tracing in the schools. But no name, it'll just say, 2 cases this week, 1 in a hybrid, 1 in a remote. But you won't get in that email, what was the contact tracing, what happened to that person. You won't get that. You'll just get just the raw facts. But I have to say, Trish is also working with trying to create, I think Mariah knows this, some kind of a dashboard that gives information that that people would want to know on an ongoing basis. How are we doing, particularly with the people who test positive?
We have the 4 metrics from panel 4 on the dashboard already.
Okay.
And I guess and it would be great to add other information in, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's been a really robust conversation in the last couple of weeks at panel 4 about adding in Brookline specific cases and sort of a trailing average. So the slides are really great. We should make sure that I know they're on the panel 4 area, but we should make sure they get wider distribution because I think they address a lot of this.
We just have to make certain that Dr. Jett has all that information. He has to legally track the stuff himself. So just another one of those situations we have to find out how to deal.
So thank you very much. I think we're going to move on to Mary Ellen and Susan for budget updates.
Yep. Let me tee this up too, if you don't mind, Suzanne.
Yeah, go
Sure.
right
If Robin could give me screen sharing so that's ready when I need it, that'd be great.
Okay. On this update, what we're trying to do is be clear, succinct, and direct about what happened and where we are financially and where we're projecting that we're going to end up and what our plan would be to address any deficits that we will be facing. I don't know whether you had a chance to read the memo that I sent earlier. I sent it later than I wanted to, but nevertheless, at some point, if you could give that a read, that will give you sort of an overview of the gestalt, so to speak. This is the whole package here. And I tried to put it on 1 page, couldn't do it, so it's on 2 pages. And it gives the background for it. And so when Mary Ellen goes through this is going to be, as I say, very much focused on what happened, what we did, where we are, and what we need. So how's that for a warm up, Mary Ellen?
I'll take it.
Okay, let's go.
All right. Let's see if I can. So you should be looking at a slide, just a slide of the FY21 update. And tonight we're just going to go through an overview of where the budget is from annual town meeting in June, all the way through to foreshadow after the November special town meeting, and a request to have a placeholder reserve fund transfer for advisory. So in June, sorry about my thing here. So back in June annual town meeting, we had an appropriation of 121,475,000, and over the summer we were waiting for the final circuit breaker allocations, and that finally came through very late in late September, early October, and so the circuit breaker funding was increased by 167,000. Some of that had to do with the increased number of students, but also this year we have a transportation reimbursement portion that we chose not to actually put into our budget planning from last June. As I closed out the fiscal year budget, I was able to not have to use all of the tuition materials fee revolving fund receipts that we have. So I carried forward that, knowing that we would need that in this fiscal year. So the fund balance of that fund was 282,000. So our base revenue offsets changed to 450,000. Then we distributed those funds based on our needs for personnel costs and some other funding and savings that we had, and trying to reduce the overall budget. Some of this reflects the impact of the Remote Learning Academy and identifying some of our savings elsewhere. Then in November town meeting for September, we're anticipating through the town school partnership roughly 1.75 million. All of that has to go to personnel costs. We're not anticipating any other changes in our tuition materials fee. We have the same number of students, and we're not expecting any change or any additional supplemental appropriations as part of circuit breaker. So the breakdown change from first quarter to special town meeting, as we enter special town meeting or after special town meeting, once the 1.75 million is appropriated, our breakdown by our line item categories will be on this particular slide. So roughly our takeaways for tonight are that we've with special town meeting and the adjustments in our materials fee, fund balance, and circuit breaker, we've added $2.2 million to the appropriation from June. However, right now, based on all the commitments that we have, we're projecting a $1.3 million deficit is continuing. And we actually have not, you have a new or updated or retitled document where I changed the document FY21 needs analysis. That needs analysis is based on what we've identified as needs for providing remote learning and hybrid learning. We have not completed all of those or implemented all that's on that memo. Some of those are in here and I've highlighted where those are. So as we look at the financials for the first quarter and our spend rate through June, we are looking at a $1.3 million deficit. So the balance is predominantly personnel, the RLA, which is essentially 9th elementary school, special education positions, backfilling. I should also have here backfilling of general education positions because it's not a straight line. You know, if we move kids out, 700 students out of our K-8 schools, we don't have a corresponding number of staff that also move and savings there. So Jim's memo that he referred to in the beginning really kind of outlines where we've reallocated staff and positions. and explains sort of where the pressure points are in our personnel categories here, salaries. Contracted services includes transportation, tuitions, our software licenses, and this over expenditure is really around software licenses and the RLA, both combined. We've had an expansion there. We've tapped into CARES funds for software licenses, ESSER funds for software license, and we're still we're still finding that we have additional curriculum software that we're expanding. The supplies is for RLA supplies, construction, typical classroom supplies that a new school would need. And the 25,000 also for RLA has to do with computers and equipment for staff because we've expanded the number of employees. So that essentially is where the 1.3 million comes from. And a lot of that, the narrative around that is covered quite well in Jim's two-pager. So one of the things we have done is, you've heard early on, we converted 400,000 from our substitute account for daily subs to try to mitigate the impact of that. We've reassigned specialists to core academic teaching positions to try to create efficiencies, but essentially the cost drivers are, as I have already outlined, and want to point out that we are having to cover the last 6 months, January to June, of our custodial services that are typically charged to our rental facilities account. We had originally planned on those staff members being funded by the CARES funds, but those funds disappear on December 31st, and we cannot actually encumber any payroll. That actually checks have to be out the door and bills paid to actually use those funds appropriately by 12/31. So the plan right now to balance the budget and to manage the 1.3 million is that we will be reviewing and freezing future hiring. We did that last spring. We've done that every year for the last 3 years that we've had budget deficits, where every position that is requested to be filled is reviewed. We will continue to work to identify savings and efficiencies and where we will not be spending funds. We will be freezing our expense budgets and continue pursuing funding that we've identified as needing from our needs analysis. And I would request the school committee notify the advisory committee, and we consider, or school committee considers asking for a placeholder for $1 million. And the reason why is that we're still living in a time of uncertainty where while we're going to work very hard to balance this budget, we don't have the expense lines that we had. We took that frankly I used the last 3 budget years to balance the budget for staffing and personnel overruns. That there's not necessarily enough room in our budget to really balance it, and I anticipate that we will end in deficit unless there's a significant change. But that change is really going to have to only come if we actually remove or we have less personnel, because that's where we are most heavy in our expenditures. That's the end of the presentation this evening. I'll stop sharing and see if there are any questions. I know we will have a finance subcommittee next week, and we can get into more details around much of this information. And I would anticipate that we would be doing at least a monthly financial report in terms of where the school district is. And then as we get into April, May, and June, similar to what we did last year, is I was doing weekly blow by blow updates as we close the fiscal year and the school year.
Helen?
So I have a question. You stated that we can't use the CARES money for after December 31st. Have we maximized the use of those monies for whatever else?
Yes, we have, and I have to say we have, because None of our operating budget was used to fund the reopening of our buildings. So all the HEPA filters, the tents, the PPE, the owls, potentially, we are mining those dollars for all sort of current, what reopening kinds of equipment, pieces, computers that we've needed to, so the operating budget was the last place we went because of the time deadline. So the first half of the fiscal year for the custodial services is on the CARES Act. Some of the help desk support is on the CARES, our reopening grant, the CVRF grant. We've put food and expenses on the town's CARES Act to help with food service deficit. We can't put any staff on either one of those, so it's been a challenge to mine for those dollars. But any opportunity that we had, we tried to protect the operating budget.
So I imagine at finance, you'll be going over this and more, have the spreadsheet of what we've spent and what's left.
I'm happy to do that with Finance Subcommittee.
I mean, I don't want to, step on Susan's toes, but I am.
Andy?
Wondering about the reserve fund transfer request. When would we be making the request, and how specific are we supposed to be about how we plan to spend that money?
Well,
so I think that will be the next discussion within the Finance Subcommittee, of which I would imagine the school education subcommittee of advisory we will attend. One of the ways what we did last year was we made a request for a placeholder so that they knew we would have a need. They had some discussion. They received this financial reports as the school committee received them. We didn't ask them for every dollar we needed. We asked them for half. I think I got less than a third or an eighth of what I was projected as needing. Due to some pretty aggressive shutting down of expenditures, I was able to balance the budget and not needing the reserve fund. But I've had a deficit budget 3 years in a row, having to balance it out. So I've mined all the little pots of dollars and funds. So I don't have the flexibility that there was in the past. And I was also dealing with roughly $500,000 to $800,000 in deficit. I was not over $1 million in deficit, with the unknowns that we have in a pandemic of reopening and staffing and anything else that we have. So the uncertainty of the times sort of elevates the anxiety around, can we really land this deficit? Because 0.5% out of $125 million budget, 0.5% we should be able to manage through. But when you get into 1% or more, it's harder to manage that out, particularly when most of it's personnel that you're not probably going to lay off.
But the point here, Mary Ellen, to request, we essentially have already spent that money on personnel. So we're looking at trying to reduce our other costs to mitigate the overspending piece. So asking for the reserve fund transfer now is really just asking the advisory committee to be aware that we are tracking to the red, and that if they had other uses for whatever money, that they would be aware that the schools are going to have a need. But we're going to explain to the advisory committee that we have a plan in place to try to reduce our spending, to close that gap, that 1.3, to close that gap to the extent that we can, and we'll be providing ongoing updates on how we're doing with it. Do I have that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Susan?
Yeah, just a couple other thoughts on that. So first of all, so thank you for this, Mary Ellen. We know there's just a lot going on. So thank you for this. And a lot of things are changing. and there really are crosswinds on this. You know, on the one hand, the deficit is real. You know, the town's financial picture is, you know, is a concern for all of us because we all live here. And at the same time, there's so much uncertainty, as Mary Ellen was saying. And frankly, there's not only uncertainty, but there's anxiety. I think about like, well, if there are budget cuts, what does that mean about, you know, promises made or equipment of, you know, PPE equipment available, or, you know, resources available for kids and all that sort of thing. So I think the anxiety on top of the uncertainty is real, as well as is the deficit. So so I appreciate this, you know, Mary Ellen, I know you always try to give us kind of early warning signals. You know, just reminding folks that normally in May is when we do the town meeting budget presentation. Obviously this past May, it didn't happen. And so we're going to approximate it as well as we can with all the uncertainty. And, you know, the bottom line on the $1 million notion is that it's, number one, a notion, and number two, that it's the last dollars, right? So I think the point is that going after efficiencies, going after places where we can, you know, sort of without, you know, damaging our operations, our educational model, that asking for reserve fund money is always sort of a last dollar situation. So Mary Ellen, I don't know if you've sent this document yet to advisory, or if you wanted to wait till we got through tonight, but it may be worth just kind of giving them a heads up. At least Cliff, he was here earlier, but maybe Cliff and Mike, and then maybe they can sort of communicate this to the members of the subcommittee so that they, if they can, attend finance next week, and we kind of start that process going, because sometimes it just takes a little while to assimilate the information, and obviously they'll have questions. And then the last thing I'll say is, Helen, to your point, I think it'd be really helpful if folks have questions. Obviously we all have a lot of questions, but I do think that if there are specific things that people are expecting to see, or they're, you know, surprised that, you know, then it would be helpful to get those sooner rather than later. I mean, Mary Ellen's still multitasking and presenting all this, so, you know, we don't have an infinite amount of time, but if there is something burning, then just getting that up sooner rather than later would be great.
Or at least being able to respond at the finance subcommittee so we can have some discussion.
Oh, I was thinking even,
No.
I wasn't even including that, but yes, that would be great.
Mary Ellen, could you just speak for a minute about in managing the 1.3 million deficit? You have talked about review and freeze future hiring, but we are way behind in our hiring. So could you just talk about that for a minute?
Let me try to give an example. So it could be that we have I'm going to go out on a limb and do this. So we have a history of hiring professional guest musicians to fill in our orchestras. Yes, those are small dollars, but we don't have the ability to have those luxuries. So that would be a position that I would reject. It could be that there's a club or organization that typically we have had a stipend for. The school committee cut and reduced stipends. Maybe it doesn't run, we don't fund it, even though somebody's gotten that stipend every year, but we're not running it. Could be that we have a person that leaves. I mean, we have a person, you know, that leaves in January in a role that we look at that role and we say, we don't really need that person. We don't need a 1.0 between now and June. We need a 1.0 next September. So we'll make sure we fund it for 22, but we don't really need that role, or we don't need all of it. So we'll try to fill it with part-time, or we'll try to have somebody who's working part-time pick up the other part-time and save half of FTE for 6 months.
Gotcha. But
that kind of creativity around hiring.
But those positions that we're now, like the paras and some of the others that we're looking for, we will continue to hire for those as applicants become available.
I think every single position gets looked at for what the need is. I think we have to look at, make sure everybody's working. And certainly those that are student facing are a priority.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Are you going to now talk about food services?
So I'm not. I know that it was on the agenda. And I did not have I was trying to land this presentation. I didn't have a chance to work with Sasha. I would really prefer Sasha have opportunity to go to school finance subcommittee first before coming directly to the committee. There's nothing that anybody needed to vote on. It was really giving you an update. The quick update is we opened from 2 to 4 kitchens, and I believe we've brought everybody back that was on the layoff list. We've brought back, and lunch is free per the USDA all the way through June for all students. So, and the CARES Act fund has helped us significantly with making. I think her report is going to show us that we're not anticipating a deficit. We might actually break even in food service this year with such a wacky delivery, or a different delivery model. So she'll be at finance subcommittee.
Thank you. Thank you. Then I think we're going to move on to MASC annual meeting. Helen, you going to help us with that?
I definitely will, along with the committee members who were at the meeting. To make this the most efficient possible, if people can open up the minutes from the Government Relations Subcommittee from your Google Doc, I think that might help to just run through what we did at the Government Relations with regards to the MASC resolutions.
And Helen, what will we need to do tonight? Do we need to vote for each resolution, or?
Yes, so we need to vote the resolutions as we did at the subcommittee. We have a recommendation from the subcommittee. So that's basically, and we need to vote a member to be our representative.
Right.
Those are the 2 items that we have to do. What I can say to maybe make this quicker, because I'm looking at the time and I know we don't have a lot of time. There were 10 resolutions, and out of the 10, we felt that we should recommend all of them, except that with resolution number 3, there was a longer discussion about a wording actually in that resolution. We discussed, and if you can take a look at it, or I can talk about it so that people at home will know what it was too. There was a school committee anti-racism resolution that was submitted by the MASC board. And though we all felt that it was really important to have an anti-racism resolution, the resolve clause said, therefore be it resolved that all school districts in the Commonwealth should guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded and practiced for our students, families, faculty, and staff. And I think the issue had to do with the word guarantee, that how can we guarantee? I mean, how can we set ourselves up for something that's we may not be able to do? So the suggestion was to replace the word guarantee with work to ensure that racist practices are eradicated. So that was the one thing, and there was a vote that we took, and it was on that particular one. All the other ones were unanimous yeses. On that particular one, we voted by roll call vote. The 2 were in favor, 1 was opposed, and then to change the word to work to ensure from guarantee. And then when we voted it, that person abstained. So I don't know if people have questions, or
maybe we can do this like at a consent agenda kind of thing, where we do all but 3, and then maybe we spend a little more time on that.
That would be fine. Does anybody have any questions about any of them? Okay.
Okay, seeing none. So I would move that we express support for resolutions 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. Do I have a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Any other, we're not doing 3 right now, just because that has something else to it. Is there any questions or comments about these? Okay, then we'll take a vote. Oh, Barbara, sorry, go ahead.
Did you skipped number 7? Did you intend to do that?
No, I did not.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, so 7 is part of it as well.
Yeah, everything except 3.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Helen?
Yes.
Susan?
Abstain. I always abstain on this one.
Yeah. David?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Dimitri?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So Helen, walk through me about number, I know you just went through number 3.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the floor for a vote from the delegates, are you suggesting we make an amendment?
I think you can submit this wording as an amendment ahead of time. I was reading some of the stuff that they sent out from the MASC.
Yeah.
About this. And I think if you can submit it as a possible amendment, then they, will bring it up at the meeting, possibly.
Yeah, I don't, does anybody know? Oh, here's an amendment form. I don't know what that was due. It's on page, we have this little booklet we got. We got that email.
Suzanne, I don't think I have that, especially because I think I probably came in after.
Yeah, it would have been this one.
Yeah,
but-
you probably don't.
Okay.
Dimitri.
Okay. Helen, I'm just trying to sit through what you, and processing it. So the reason why we wanted to move away from guarantee, is it because we don't have the protocols to respond to guarantee, or?
I don't think that we can guarantee anything.
Yeah,
per
okay.
se. It's not just on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, well, we can't even guarantee, I mean, yeah, I think that was where it was coming from. Not that this wasn't an important resolution, not that this wasn't something that we all were in favor of, but that word guarantee sort of stood out at us as, how do we do that?
Yeah, and so that's why I was trying to think, in order for us to guarantee something, what protocols or what practice would we need to have in place that would allow us to say, yeah, we can guarantee. And I just didn't know if we had a sense of what that would be.
That I don't. I'm not even sure they do.
They do, okay.
But then,
So I was the dissenter on changing the language. And I think it's important to recognize that the phrasing is not will guarantee, but should guarantee. And I think that it speaks to about where we should be aiming, even if we are not perfect in getting there, but about what we think is the right thing to do. And so that's why I did not want to have the language changed. And I would hope that even as a full body, we would vote to reaffirm the original language. Thank you.
So I'll just point out that it is a non-binding resolution. So I'm not sure how you actually enforce it, but I actually agree with Mariah that I would support the original resolution. Susan.
I'm going to abstain because I always abstain on these, but for the record, I agree with Mariah also.
So are you moving to make the change so then we vote whether we want the change and then we vote on the original? Is that how we would do that?
First, we would move the original language, then Helen would submit an amendment, then you would vote on the amendment, and if the amendment fails, you would move the original. If the amendment passes, then everyone votes on the amended language. So I'm going to take that first step and move the original language.
Okay.
I second it.
Okay. So Helen, did you want to amend it or no?
Yes, I will ask to amend it and with should work to ensure. With should work to ensure as opposed to should guarantee that.
Okay. Do I have a second to that amendment?
Second.
Okay, so Mariah, you keep us honest here. So now we vote on the amendment.
Now you vote on the amendment and we see if the amendment passes, then we go ahead to, then the next step depends on whether the amendment passes.
Okay.
Dimitri had something to say.
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
David?
I just want to hear a little more on the reasoning here because I do see both sides of this. So I'm a little bit torn because on the one hand, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that we could ever guarantee something like the eradication of racism. Of course, I want to eradicate racism. I think all of us do. But how do you guarantee that and how do you measure that? But I also understand the other side that if you sort of water down the language, then even as an aspiration, you're somewhat falling short. So I'm just wondering if sort of the two arguments could be laid out by those who are proponents of them.
Do you want me to say something, Suzanne?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, I guess I don't have a lot to add to what I already said before. But I would agree, I would reemphasize that what Suzanne says is it's a non-binding resolution and it actually is to ourselves. The different resolutions all have different audiences and this one is actually calling on the school committee to do its own actions. And so I think that it's non-binding to ourselves. Why would we water down our own sort of, to use your words, our own instructions to ourselves?
I guess I don't see it as watering down. I see it as us, working towards something that's really important. I just don't, well, okay. I mean,
I think, I was the other member of that subcommittee when we discussed this before. I think the idea was that we should promise what is within our control. We cannot promise something that is not within our control, and this is a promise. To guarantee something is to promise it. And we can promise to work to eradicate something. We cannot promise to actually eradicate it.
I think we should call the vote.
Can I actually make one other comment about that actually? Is the other thing I think about is how this plays on the floor of MASC. Brookline has recommended like a different set of language and what that looks like. I think is important with the message that sends. So not what it looks like, but the message that might send.
Yeah, Barbara?
I'm wondering if instead of work to ensure, we said strive to guarantee.
Which, Barbara, it would seem to me at this point is should guarantee moves. I think I understand, but I think I think everyone here in the town is committed to issues of equity, and we understand that these are systemic issues. And it seems to me that as leaders, educational leaders in the town, we want to guarantee that in fact we will work to eradicate these. You can fail, as Andy's pointed out. We may not, we may say that we wanted a guarantee and we fail at the task, but to say should guarantee is aspirational enough and give us enough room. We may not get there, we may fail, but our desire and our dedication is to guarantee it.
Should we call the question? The amendment, right? Yep. So we're voting now on the amendment to substitute the words work to ensure instead of for should guarantee. So on the amendment, Helen?
Yes.
Susan?
I want to abstain, but I actually care about this. So no, I don't like the easier language. I really care about this one. I really want to abstain, but I can't. No, I don't. We're voting on the weaker language. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
No.
the amendment, yeah.
No.
David?
Abstain.
Abstain. Barbara?
Abstain.
Dimitri?
No.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
No.
And I vote no as well. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 noes, 2 yeses, and 2 abstentions. So I think that means the amendment does not pass.
Good.
And so now we vote for the original language. Are we there?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. We ready to vote? I'll start with Dimitri,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Mariah,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Helen,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Okay, thank you. And is this, oh, we have to vote for a delegate?
Right. I nominate Suzanne.
I did it last year, folks.
Second.
Yes.
Anybody else? If somebody else wants it, they can have it. It's Saturday. Okay, we'll vote then. Helen,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Dimitri,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Mariah,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. What the heck? Okay. Now,
Can I bring up one other thing from government relations as long as we are on that?
yeah, is that the new business thing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna ask you
Under
about that.
that same, oh, okay. So Mariah brought up at our meeting the issue of the open meeting law and being able to continue Zooms after the executive order goes out of effect, and trying to get some legislation moving on that. I in turn actually, from Mariah's suggestion, called the MASC, Glenn, and in terms of whether it was even possible to get that at the meeting. He said no, that the meeting was sort of set, but that this was certainly an issue that the board could take up and would take up after the annual meeting. So I have started to move forward with that. I also contacted Rebecca Stone, a former school committee member and chair of the Commission for Women, who started this piece, and she was very glad to hear that we were also trying to support this. And I think as things calm down in the school committee, I will try and work some of our legislators too in terms of helping us out with this. So more to come.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mariah, for suggesting this, for sure. Okay, we're going to subcommittee and liaison reports. Jennifer's not here, so I guess we will reschedule curriculum. Oh, Helen?
No, I didn't. I have another subcommittee.
Okay, hold on. So let's just we'll reschedule curriculum, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And now up to liaisons and updates or whatever. Helen?
So I'd like to catch people up on just informational from some of the capital pieces, and also the superintendent search, just to keep people aware of where we are. Beginning with capital, the Pierce School, as you remember, went out for requests for proposals from architects. They came in, today's Thursday, yesterday, and we got 8 submissions, actually some excellent architectural firms. I don't know if you want me to go through and let people know who they were or not. I mean, it's a public.
Are they listed somewhere, Helen?
No, not yet. They will be. I can send it out to the committee.
Okay.
So you don't have to. But I was very pleased with the the groups who did submit. I haven't seen the actual submissions yet. We will be getting them. So that was one. We will be having a capital subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, the 10th. And part of that will be the discussion of technology needs. I've invited Scott Moore and Feng Yang to come and talk with us about what they're seeing in terms of those aspects. And that's it for capital. Are there any questions? Or anything I missed? No. The superintendent search, we met last week for the first time, discussed the search and getting a search firm. We decided to do a request for quotes, which we are allowed to do, to put it out to 3 different entities, as long as the price is between 10 and 50,000. That went out. Actually, we then did a form that we sent out to 3 different firms today, and we're requesting that by November 12th, they submit their quotes along with their proposal, and the committee will be meeting on the 13th. That's it. I just wanted you to know we're moving ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Helen. Does anyone else have an update or liaison report or?
I can do a quick one. The last meeting we had, when we had our workshop, we asked the policy committee review to begin to work on the protocols. So I've started working on a draft document of that. I think I'll have it ready for that subcommittee meeting. We're meeting on Monday. So I think by next week, we'll be ready to distribute with all of you a draft document for your review.
Thank you, Dimitri. Okay, is there any new business that we haven't covered yet? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to meet in an executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A for the following purposes. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Brookline Educators Union, BEU, Unit A, Unit B, and paraprofessionals. And are we doing AFSCME, Mary Ellen? I'll say it in case. And with AFSCME, school food services employees, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. And purpose 7, to review and approve executive session minutes from the following meetings, October 8th, October 15th, and October 22nd, all of 2020. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. So we'll take a vote. David?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Dimitri?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
And Helen?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. We will not be coming back to an open session. So we will see most of us on the other side.
Can we have a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Just to find out the election results?
Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
Oh, some people have been watching.
Well, you refresh New York Times every once in a while.